Finally, man, so damn
Yeah,
late.
a little late there. Let's give it a second to. YouTube sometimes takes a second to get started.
Finish the ad.
Yeah. 3 hours later. A little late there. Let's give it a second to.
Overstating it
YouTube
so
sometimes takes
much.
a second. People are a little dramatic.
Oh god, I guess I should have your channel muted.
Yeah, I've got to do that too. 3 hours later. There we go. Let's give it 1 minute, 8:05 or 7:05, I guess. Then we can start. Imagine unironically being British.
So we should just talk about Big Brother for the next minute before we start, right?
Well, I didn't watch the episode yet, so we can't. Otherwise,
I
we
can, but you'll be spoiled.
Did they send somebody home, or are they doing that
No.
tonight?
I think that's happening tonight.
How's the oldest person looking? Likely target?
You'd think so, but he doesn't seem to be on anyone's radar.
Huh. We'll see. All right, I think we've got the whole crew here. That's weird. It says only 15 watching, but we had like 50.
It's 141 watching,
Okay.
as far as I can see right now. So
Okay. A lot of bras. I think we've got 30 seconds left. Anything you want to say before we officially start recording, Corey?
I've officially started recording already. I'm going to edit this part out, but that
Wow.
ship has sailed.
Okay, well, anything before we cross the
yes,
threshold
that's
that can never be crossed?
No.
Okay.
So
yes,
I'm good.
Everyone in the chat, this is live. Let's get started. Hello, guys. This is Eckhart Slaughter, joined by my good friend Corey. We are on... Let me start again. Hey, guys. This is Eckhart Slaughter, joined by my friend Corey. We are doing episode 3 of Tapcaf Transmissions, the still pretty brand new podcast, which will be talking about Star Wars Legends books. This intro was a little less clean than last week's, but that's what happens when you do it on my channel. Corey, do you want to give a brief introduction for those in the chat who don't know you yet?
Hello, everyone. I am Corey. I also do Star Wars lore YouTube stuff and Star Wars gaming stuff on my own channels. So we're here to talk about Wedge's Gamble, which the publisher actually just emailed us right before. It's actually been renamed to Wedge's Surprise Mechanics. So we're going to be talking about that tonight.
Wow, that is a very
Spicy.
Yeah, that's a spicy joke and well timed. Good job.
I've been waiting 2 hours to say it. So
Now I've got to make sure I upload this on the Podbean properly, or else the joke will be really dated. I can't get lazy with it. Speaking of, for those of you who would prefer just to listen to this, because we are still trying to figure out the mechanics of how this podcast will work, it will be live on YouTube. 1 week we'll do my channel, and then 2 weeks later for the next episode, it will go on Corey's channel, at least live. Then you can go between them and watch whatever VOD you'd like. But we also will have it available on Spotify. We have it on iTunes now, and also Podbean. Links to all of that down in the description.
Yep. If you're watching this on my channel, you can see links to Eckhart's channels in the description. If you're watching it on Eckhart's Lanners,
Yeah, close
Eckhart's
enough.
channels, there's links to mine in the description as well. I've also got the main channels for each of us on the layout for the stream here, so you can see links to either channel always, because shameless self-promotion is what the internet's all about.
Yep. So let's get right into it, because a bit of feedback we did get from last episode is we kind of meandered a bit. We got on one topic, and they were like really random topics too, and we kind of stayed on there for like 20 minutes. So this time we are going to try to be a bit more organized. Corey was nice enough to write us out a little schedule, or not a schedule, but I guess key points to tackle. And we will still get a little off topic, but we're trying to figure out a format that really works. So make sure
the first time. Sorry.
Go ahead.
The first time it was a bit too like point by point.
Yeah.
And then the second time we got a little bit too far away from that. So we're trying to find where the happy medium for that is. So keep the feedback coming. We'll keep doing our best to adjust for whatever works.
Yep. And I guess one last thing to mention before we get into it is we do now have an email address. So if you want to, we encourage you guys to read along with us. The schedule and the order we're doing things in is pretty obvious. We're going to, keep doing X-Wing, and then we'll move to whatever works chronologically. So next week, for example, will be Krytos Trap. So if you want to read...
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now, will be Krytos Trap. So if you guys want to read and share your thoughts. We'll probably try to bring them up during the video as much as we can.
Yep, and we'll also take questions from the chat towards the end of the video as well.
Yeah, that's
or
true.
towards the end of the stream.
Yep. Okay,
But
so
I guess that
yeah.
brings us into Wedge's Gamble. Wedge's
Right.
Surprise Mechanic. Sorry.
Right. Or Wedge's Gambit, as the chat was accidentally. I think a few people thought it was genuinely called Wedge's Gambit, and that like we were stupid for getting it wrong.
Well, we have a picture of the book cover right there,
Yeah.
so we're good.
Yeah. So I guess one thing that we were both kind of surprised about, like I don't want to speak for you, but I know for me personally, I read these books after they all came out. So I didn't realize, and I thought that the X-Wing series, like Out of Universe, came out pretty much right after Thrawn. I didn't realize by this point they were all the way up to Black Fleet Crisis, which is what 13 years into the, or I guess 13 years after Yavin, I think, or 14.
Yeah, like I always had the image of them coming out in the 90s, which is correct, but I always thought like early 90s for Rogue Squadron, and then it was really setting up everything, and then you kind of went chronologically through after that. But
Yeah.
like you're saying, you had pretty much the whole era set up. Corellian Trilogy and Black Fleet Crisis are some of the last things that happened before the Yuzon Vong War,
Yep.
and they were coming out at the same time, or even slightly before.
Right. Yeah, for me it was more Duel, because I was like, okay, so did Jedi Academy trilogy come after this? Because Morth Duel is like obviously a pretty main character in at least parts of that series. But no, that was way before this, and it's just interesting because the whole X-Wing series does feel kind of foundational to Star Wars Legends. Like, but yeah, interesting thing that I guess I never thought about.
Yeah, we usually start off by talking a little bit about the kind of broader context the book was in and out of universe.
Mm-hmm.
But since we talked about a lot of that when we started Rogue Squadron, or started X-Wing with Rogue Squadron last time, I don't know if we really will go too much more into that.
Yeah.
Michael Stackpole is the author of this book. We talked last time about the other stuff he's written, which is the early parts of the X-Wing series. He's written the next two we're going to be talking about, which is Krytos Trap and Back to War. He also wrote Isard's Revenge for the X-Wing books, and then you have the Dark Tide books in the Yuzon Vong era, and also I, Jedi, which is another book about Corrin that we are going to be talking about later. But anything else you want to add for that information?
No, just that. Why nothing in new canon yet? I wonder.
Is he still contracted with Bantam?
I'm not sure, because I know he's like had a. Well, isn't Bantam part of whatever company is now doing Star Wars? Isn't Bantam technically part of whatever company owns Del Rey, I think?
I'm not sure. I'm assuming whatever he is or isn't doing to do with specifics of his current contracts and anything, but
yeah, well, like he said, like he's had a willingness to, and I don't want to get too off topic, but has a willingness to write Star Wars again. He says he enjoys it. There's like a lot of rumors about how Lucasfilm treats their writers and stuff, but like he's had a willingness to come back, just like of course Timothy Zahn came back. I don't know, Alphabet Squadron would have been something like that, would have been a good option, but I guess it was for naught.
Yeah.
Should we move into?
Well, we got Zan back, I'm sure, at some point.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about. I guess the best place to jump in would be like the in-universe context, and obviously Coruscant is the planet in Star Wars. It's the seat of the Empire, and hopefully, after the end of this story, the seat of the New Republic. So, Corey, why would you say that capturing Coruscant is or isn't the right move for the New Republic at this point?
Well, so after the Empire fell apart, there's so many different disparate factions, and whoever can get Coruscant has legitimacy in the galaxy's eyes. It's going to be very hard to hold, which is what a lot of the book is about. So all their plans for how to get Coruscant really have to take into account how can you get and then hold Coruscant. And we were talking a little bit before the show about, well, is it really a good idea for Isard to do her plan in this book on Coruscant, which is we'll get into it, but to give up Coruscant. And that was a large part of it, is that she kind of realizes that the New Republic is going to come, or Warlord Zinj is going to come, and someone is going to take over. So Coruscant is really the crux of everything.
Right. And Yeah, it's like the same thing. We mentioned this a little bit with Borlias. Like, the key is taking the planet, but making sure that the defensive structures are still in place. If you destroy the shield generator, or if you kill half the populace and they are going to rise up against you, then it was all for naught. And there's one part where Akbar talks about, like, the strategic options to take the planet. There's a blockade, which was seen as not feasible because basically the entire rebel fleet would have had to be around the planet to cut supplies off. Not only are you really killing the people in the Undercity before anybody else, but then, you've got Zinj and the other warlords kind of romping about now undefended territory, taking planets back, doing whatever. So it's an interesting mechanic, and we see it with Thrawn too.
Yeah, one of the things the book actually touches on a little bit is just how self-reliant Coruscant isn't when they're talking about whether they can blockade it. So even basic resources get shipped in. It obviously not much farming you could do. There's probably some technology that allows some food production.
Yeah.
And waste management must be just
I think they just throw it into a hole somewhere.
The Maw?
Yeah.
They tell you that the Maw was built to keep Abeloth in. Really, it was for all of Coruscant's waste.
Yeah. But yeah, they've got the poles, like, and it's interesting because Legends, there are a few times where they mention, like, Coruscant having like snowy poles. I think, doesn't Han go skiing in the Jedi Academy trilogy?
Yeah, they take a vacation up there a couple times.
Yeah.
I think is it in the Thrawn trilogy where it comes up too?
I don't remember, but
I don't remember, but they definitely do.
And there's a big ocean too.
Yeah.
But none of this is like even just the basic elements of how Coruscant is, like, I guess, talked about is changed pretty wildly between books. Like, when I read this, I imagine Coruscant as being basically a city with really tall buildings, and there is an undercity, but not to the degree we get later, where it's like, especially as like Legends was near its end, Coruscant is almost like an ocean. You've got the kind of basic level that the skyscrapers are built upon, but then you've got 1,000 levels below that, and like no one ever goes to the bottom. In this, it's kind of like Coruscant is a bit more kind of reasonably sized.
Yeah, and everyone would picture kind of the Coruscant we got in the prequel trilogy, but Coruscant was one of the things that was brought in from developments of the expanded universe for the past few decades that George Lucas then brought in. So the whole, like, Ecumenopolis situation that we kind of think of now wouldn't have really existed. This was it being developed before those ideas were transferred into the movie. So one of the things I was trying to picture with all that is just how what we've seen from the movies kind of translates to, or how much it matches up with what comes up here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's...
like with wild speeder chases being something that features in both.
Yeah. I mean, the way the Jedi... It's not so bad with the original trilogy stuff. Like, especially with space combat is closer, I think, in the X-Wing series to the original trilogy than we see later on. Because, like, ships are fighting at extremely close distances. It's I said this last episode, it's basically jet planes in space. Where other expanded universe stuff, like if you read, say, Legacy of the Force, the capital ships are firing at each other from maybe a few hundred kilometers away. The starfighters are doing the same. Well, not quite the same, but they're on a similar scale. So this matches that pretty closely. Where it diverges a little bit more is how they treat Jedi in the Clone Wars. Although they actually do a pretty good job in this book of not, like, putting their foot in their mouth too much. They kind of do that later a bit when we get to Jedi Academy, but this one wasn't too bad, I thought.
Yeah, it jumps ahead a little bit to bring this up now, but there was one particular line where it does kind of clash with what we know from Episode 3, where the line was, after the resolution of the Clone Wars, the Jedi began to move towards an open grab for power.
Right.
So there wasn't quite the same idea that the Clone Wars ended with Order 66 or something similar. It was instead, Clone Wars ended, Jedi were trying to take power, or the narrative was that the Jedi were trying to take power, and then Palpatine cracked down on them, whereas in as it later developed, it was all kind of one big event.
Yeah, another thing too is Palpatine, and this goes back to the novelization for Episode 4, they refer to him just as a senator, so I don't think it was clear. Like, he seemed to be one of many senators, maybe the most corrupt. And because, in this book it says Senator Palpatine at the time, basically. before he declared the Empire. So I don't know if he was supposed to be, the chief of state or the head of state, whatever they would have made the term to be, or if that was kind of a idea that came with the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, like Palpatine as Darth Sidious hadn't really, like, I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have really come up because that was like they definitely had him as obviously a Force user, but the idea of the Sith was something that they kind of had to be a bit more vague on until
right,
George Lucas did the stuff in the prequel trilogy, like even in
right,
Dark Empire,
yeah,
it hints at some stuff in that, but they end up a lot like what they had to do with the Clone Wars mentions, be very vague about it.
right. Well, yeah, and like everyone knows the story where Timothy Zahn wanted the Nogri to be the Sith, right? They didn't have a whole lot of idea of what was going on. But yeah, because the original idea for Palpatine 2 back in the novelization was that Palpatine was the Emperor. The Emperor himself wasn't Force sensitive, but was kind of being manipulated by like some sort of Darksider. And then obviously that changed and they were kind of put into one individual. But you're right, the idea of like what a Sith actually was definitely hadn't fully came out at this point. They say Sith occasionally, like especially like Sith spit or Sith spawn, but mostly when you deal with an evil Force user, they call them Dark Jedi.
Yeah, there's a mention here of Zizer's grab for power was in from the start, but it was the Black Sun organization that allowed him to contemplate opposing the Dark Lord of the Sith, where, because of just the context of that, it's not entirely clear if it was talking about Vader with that or Palpatine.
Right. That's interesting.
I guess we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves there. So, as we have been kind of discussing, the main plot of the book is the capture of Coruscant and exactly how the New Republic should go about that. So a lot of the opening phase of the book are some meetings with the Provisional Council, including some other military figures like Wedges there and General Som. I think, no, is Som there?
I don't think he's there for this one.
So.
No.
So he's been a big character in the last book, but he was not. He kind of falls to the wayside here.
Yeah, it's like Mon Mothma, a few of the like admirals, and then I don't remember what I can't remember exactly who was there, but what do you think of like the bit of politics that early on, or like how do you think they handled it? I guess
I think a lot of it was handled relatively okay, but it was still working off of relationships that we already knew where they went. Because the big political kerfuffles in this period are kind of between Akbar and Borskfalia, who hasn't really come up so far in the podcast because he wasn't a major character that's super involved with anything we've been talking about so far.
Yeah, like I think he gets a mention maybe in Truce Pakura, is it?
He's definitely mentioned a couple times, but he's not really doing it. You don't learn too much about him. But by this point, the Thrawn trilogy, as we were saying, has already come out. Some of the later stuff has already come out, and he's kind of been set up as this rival for Akbar. They do bring it up as Laren Crefay, the incompetent Bothan from the last episode or the last book, Rogue Squadron, who kind of failed at Borleas, was kind of the Bothan's last military hope.
Yeah,
so when he's dead.
Yeah, and he's right, and then he like, because we should give a bit of context for Bothans because they are like a really big part moving forward. Basically, Bothans are like all about securing power, and like political scheming and stuff is completely normal to them. So whenever Borsk talks, he's always got some sort of secondary motivation, or he's always trying to do something. Yes, ultimately he does want the New Republic to be successful, but he wants to get credit and he wants to grab power.
He kind of just doesn't. We don't get anything from his perspective yet, but you can see there's a couple of conversations between him and Akbar where it's like pretty clear that he doesn't realize that Akbar isn't operating the same way he is. So he kind of just expects that Mon Mothma, Leia, Akbar, and even Wedge are kind of playing the same political game he is, where that's just part and parcel of running the government or setting up the New Republic.
Right. They talk about I think Akbar or Leia, when talking with Wedge, she talks about like how Akbar set the meeting up to be as favorable as possible to him. Like he makes it so the environment they're in is really comfortable to all of his allies, but uncomfortable to all of Akbar's allies. And you actually sent me a kind of funny meme you made about that. But
Yeah, it's something that comes up a few times in the book where Celestians, I guess maybe it hadn't. I'm gonna just say maybe it hadn't been established yet that Sullust was volcanic, and they're on this. It may have been. I might just be giving him too much credit, but the there's always mentions of Celestians liking the cold or just this grassland plains planet in Akivzor being uh being too warm for the
it's
Celestians.
like a warm breeze.
There's like I think there's at least two mentions, maybe
Yeah, there
three,
are.
of like air conditioning being set up for Celestians. It's like no.
Like, dude, they live on a lava planet. Like, what are you doing? Yeah, there are a few little kind of logical inconsistencies just like that. The other one that I kind of noticed was with Zinj, when Leia's talking about Zinj. And I guess after I mention this, maybe we should go deeper into him because I like how they use him in this book, but Zinj is, I would say he's the warlord at this point and probably the most powerful warlord ever, unless you count like Thrawn, I guess, or if you count the Emperor. I guess Dala, when she unifies them all, is maybe a little bit more powerful. But Zinj is like Big Daddy. Like he's like thrown his weight around, his considerable weight around. And,
He's definitely the big bad, but like I think the Pentastar element probably is the most powerful, but they're not active, which is convenient because no early books bring them up. It's almost as if they were invented afterwards.
Totally for the Essential Guide to Warfare. But yeah, she talks about how Zinj was like kind of incompetent. Well, not incompetent, but she basically suggests that he grabbed a lot of power after the death of the Emperor. Like he took, because he had a super star destroyer. I don't know if does he call it the Iron Fist after Endor, because it's called the Brawl first, right? And then he renames it.
Yeah.
So
I'm not sure exactly when, but
yeah. So basically, but later lore, I guess, kind of lays out that he was actually one of the most powerful individuals, like in the Empire's heyday, because he has, is it the Quelli Oversector? I think he has control of.
Yeah.
Which is like a big portion of the galaxy. He's got fleets under his command. I think even like the Crimson Command is technically his.
Originally, it was supposed to be his, but the Pterodok brothers took it right after Endor. It gets kind of messy with how all that gets divided, because technically a lot of sources had Oversector Outer, which is what Kane controlled, being the entire Outer Rim pretty much. So he had everything up at like Bastion, which is northwest, down to Arido Authority territory, which is south central, and everything in the rim was his. But then you have Zinj taking a lot of the northeast, and then Pentastar ends up in the northwest. Pterodok just under Zinj, but a lot of that was stuff that was established later.
Yeah, like it's weird because Zinj is kind of simultaneously described as being really expansionist, like especially when compared to the Pentastar alignment, but he also would have had this really large territory, and he would have had, like, part of the reason he is so powerful is because when the Emperor fell, he had all of these assets under his command already.
Yeah, and he's also kind of a person for whom the title of warlord was a title beforehand as well.
Exactly.
Where everyone else just kind of took the title. Right. For him, it had some sort of, or even if it wasn't like a formal military rank, it was at least a ceremonial thing he had.
Didn't Thrawn get that title too?
Thrawn, I think if he technically got it would have been later. But it's another thing that's kind of inconsistent.
Right. So yeah, I guess to set up the context for what's going on here, because I wouldn't say Zinj is as powerful as the New Republic, but like he's really throwing his weight around right now. And yeah, like he's a thick boy too, especially when he's got that super star destroyer. And like Leia kind of talks about how him having a super star destroyer is like an ego thing. I guess we get the same thing kind of with Isard later on, but yeah, so there's basically the Empire, like and it's hard to just call one faction the Empire because they're all sort of came from the Empire, but Isard's Empire, I guess, has a sort of legitimacy because you can trace her, I guess, command to like the actual ruling council and whatnot. So she's kind of seen as, I guess, one of the main Imperial factions at this point. Then, of course, there's the New Republic, and they, by this point, have a lot of planets, and there's a lot of neutral planets. Then there's Zinj, and then there's a lot of other warlords as well. And Thrawn,
Yeah, so
but
after Palpatine dies, Saint Pestage was kind of set up as his the guy who was in charge until a proper successor could be found. And a lot of it does come back to these were the people that were in charge of Coruscant.
yeah.
So even a lot of the warlords that broke off, aside from Zinj, were still paying some kind of lip service to Imperial Center.
Yeah.
So whoever was ruling from Coruscant. So you had warlords like Harsk and even the Pterodox who were fleshed out a lot more later, but they would still say, technically, we're loyal to, technically, we're loyal to the Empire, and would listen as long as someone was ruling from Coruscant. And that's another reason why Coruscant was so important. As soon as you do that, it kind of breaks everyone up, and there's no clear power structure.
Yeah, because there's no like thread connecting them. Like, and this whole, I mean, we'll get to this more, I think, when we get to the Thrawn trilogy and if we do Dark Empire. But this whole era is made complicated by the fact that, like, when Thrawn comes about in his trilogy, he's kind of described as being on his own. But later material, like the Essential Guide to Warfare, talked about, like, it talks about the Pentastar alignment giving him ships and even maybe their Super Star Destroyer before his death. And then we also have the Dark Empire with Palpatine basically whispering to people and telling them to come to the deep core. So there's like a lot of kind of context here that's built up later by other material, which I don't know, I find it interesting, and I think it kind of makes sense because you've got to think of a realistic way for the Empire to lose 25,000 Star Destroyers.
To the point that the Battle for Coruscant involves too, even if they are trying to give away the planet.
Yes. Well, at one point there were 7 victory Star Destroyers. When they're talking about Coruscant's defenses, there were 7 victories.
Which are more powerful than Golan 3s, which can also melt by direct sunlight.
Right.
Which you can like if you have a big enough mirror and you concentrate on something, you do some damage, but that went a little bit far here. It was like melting a Golan 3.
Yeah. So maybe we'll get to that because there's a lot of interesting stuff in the later battle. I guess we'll get to that part later. But is there anything else you want to talk about? State of the Galaxy? Just the New Republic is really just kind of plugging away.
We've covered most of it, but I guess just to reiterate that Coruscant was seen as how you establish legitimacy, and it was a 3-horse race. They saw it as a 3-horse race between New Republic, the Empire proper under Isard, and Zinj, where if Isard kept Coruscant, the New Republic attacked and failed, then Zinj could come in. Like whoever won in the initial assault would just leave them both vulnerable for the third person to come in. So that really is why it set up so much of the assault around how do we get it in a way that allows us to keep it.
Yeah, the main kind of factor is the planetary shields, which I don't know if I quite buy, just because I feel like it would be really hard to fully invade a planet like Coruscant. Just because it's so large, I guess they do kind of get to this, like, it doesn't, like, she hides Curtain Lore there and other cells there, but I just feel like Coruscant would be a very difficult planet to hold, just because you can hide entire armies, like, under the city if you wanted.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that the planet that could save the galaxy from not being governed couldn't govern itself. Palpatine meme or something, yeah.
You almost did it. Close enough.
You know what I was going for.
I do. So do you want to talk about Rogue Squadron itself at this point? Because first off, I mentioned last book about how the series has a tendency to quietly introduce major plot points. Like I think they do that with Noara Ven and Lujani, but in this one, wait, is it Lujani Noara Ven is dating? Or was dating? She's
Noara Ven is dating Rosati.
Rosati, right. But it does that in this book too, where it like kind of quietly introduces a piece of information, which is that Bror Jace is supposedly dead. And Bror Jace in the last book is like Rogue Squadron's, besides for Wedge, Rogue Squadron's best or second best pilot.
Yeah, so we open up with main character, quote unquote, killed off screen.
Yeah.
Uh, is he actually dead? Who knows? We know,
We do
but
know.
the there's two new squadron members they have after all the casualties of the last few, or of the last book, the last few battles of the last book, where Errol Nunb, who was kind of introduced at the start of Rogue Squadron as one of the candidates for the
Oh,
initial
right. I forgot
selection.
about that.
And Wedge even kind of mentions that with you weren't selected before because we were going to be training people, but you were too good. And then we have God's gift to himself, Pash Kraken.
Such a Mary Sue.
I was just too good at everything, so I had to leave so I could prove how good I was again.
Yeah. So Pash Kraken is the son of Aaron Kraken. I think that's how you say his first name, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, Aaron
or that's how
Kraken,
I say it.
who
Specific.
he appears in Return of the Jedi, and he's got a long storied career until a fateful death that we'll get to eventually. Um, but he's like, I guess right now at this point he's like the head of New Republic intelligence, and I think he stays the head until he dies, right?
Yeah, he's busy writing threat dossiers.
Right. We gotta do a whole video just dedicated to Kraken's threat dossiers, and
Oh
it's
my
really
god,
janky art.
just a video of it burning.
Yeah. But yeah, so Pash is his son, and basically he's described as like just the perfect guy. He's a real sweet boy. He's got nice hair, but most importantly, he's like a savant when it comes to flying a starfighter. He goes undercover into the Empire, and he leaves with a bunch of was it a full squadron of TIEs, I think? And they get their
Yeah, he left with all of his ties, and everyone lived because he's so good.
right. And then he's like, yeah, my squad, I was too good. My squad thinks I'm invincible, so I'm not performing to my full potential. I'm getting lazy. I'm going to get someone killed. So he joins Rogue Squadron, where he still is like the best pilot, besides maybe Corrin. At one point, Corrin's like, no one could have kept up with me besides Pash. And then, because he's like, yeah, I need somewhere where I'll be more grounded. And apparently that's Rogue Squadron.
Yeah, he was flying A wings with Kraken's flight group, which is what he had under his command. And Wedge says something like, "Oh, are you sure we're not gonna be too slow for you flying X wings?"
Yeah.
So he's going to type of ship he's not as familiar with, and he's
Mm-hmm.
just. I think it's actually, is it Wedge that makes the point of like no one but maybe Pash would keep up with Corrin?
Yeah, I think
I
you're
think this
right.
is one
Yeah,
point where
I
it's
think you're
not
right.
Corrin being an ego because
Yeah.
there's a lot of places where Corrin is Corrin's biggest fan,
Yeah.
but you got to give him credit where credit's due, and that it's not always him praising himself.
Yep. I've got to correct myself, by the way, too. I thought Kraken died in the Vong War, but apparently he just doesn't. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I wasn't sure if he died or not, but he does kind of fade into obscurity.
yeah,
Like Maydeen dies with Darksaber,
yeah,
and they talk about is it General Riken or no? I think they talk about Dodonna just randomly screen in this one.
yeah. But of course, he's not dead either.
Yeah,
Um,
we had Dodonna, and I did
but
something like that.
Dodonna dies in canon, though. Like, canon kills Dodonna in like the comics, like before even Empire Strikes Back, or before Return of the Jedi. I can't remember.
We barely had any ships at Yavin. We had General Dodonna, but he's gone.
Yeah,
Back at Yavin, we didn't have any admirals.
yep.
Oh, that was one other thing that kind of came up. I'm not sure if it was earlier with Akbar, if it was during his one-on-one meeting later with Borsk, but it kind of you get a bit of Akbar's where he was thinking he was useful because he brought the ships from Mon Calamari. He served as like Tarkin's slave, so he knew a lot of military doctrine. But it doesn't really paint Akbar as quite the brilliant strategist. Like the reason for his
Yeah, no, I agree.
position isn't necessarily the brilliant strategist thing that would come up in pretty much everything else for him.
Yeah, he was still
where
kind
it's
of
more a status thing.
yeah. I mean, which is weird because I guess stuff like even by Jedi Academy trilogy, like he's, Akbar's got some big nuts on him, but like at this,
Well, even by the Thrawn trilogy,
right,
3 years later, it's talking about him as being kind of like
right. But I think he
maybe
gets
just
played
slightly
pretty
below
hard by
Thrawn.
Thrawn, though. I
Well,
always felt like in the Thrawn trilogy, Akbar gets outplayed pretty hard.
he does, but the stuff where he's getting outplayed is more because Borsk is like tripping him up
Right.
as well, where he's
Yeah.
not really free to act on anything.
Well, I'd say at the end, like the New Republic fleet gets put into a really bad position because Akbar misreads like Thrawn's tactics. I think.
Yeah. And
Um,
he's still doing really good things in Rogue Squadron, like his especially like it shows him as being really good with inter relationships other
yeah,
than
definitely.
like whenever he's diffusing things between Wedge and Som,
Hmm.
uh he's got a pretty good grasp of everything with Borleus, with
Hmm.
Coruscant. It usually his shortcomings come from like political side of things working against him.
In this book, he on the tactic side, he does pull off what I read to be basically the Akbar slash, which is mentioned in like some of the. This is how I read it anyway. And I've got a problem kind of reading space combat, but what at the end when they've got like they're assaulting the star destroyers, and he basically pushes right through the middle and hits both of them with the guns on the. I think the
Yeah,
home one and the
so
Mon Ramonda and stuff. That was kind of like an Akbar slash,
I
really.
think it was Monarch was fighting Liberator.
Yeah.
It was Triumph and Monarch on the Imperial side, Liberator and Emancipator.
Which are really
Uh,
weird names for Imperial ships, by the
yeah,
way.
I kept thinking like, oh, are these new?
Yeah, me too.
But no, Triumph kind of makes sense, but Monarch, I guess, could Emperor
Yeah,
Monarch, but either way,
yeah.
two of the Star Destroyers are kind of broadsiding each other, and then he sends Mon Ramonda and MC-80B in front
Mm-hmm.
of the Star Destroyer that was on the Imperial side and was
Mm-hmm.
able to just unload on it while it was fighting the other New Republic one.
Yeah, it's a nice little maneuver. But he does. You're right. He does. Even with he doesn't have a whole lot of political skill, but he is kind of aware of what he needs to do to get like his strategy accepted. Like he purposefully allows Failure to get some wins so that he seems like he wants to negotiate properly. I think they mentioned that Akbar was never really interested in a blockade, um, but that
Yeah,
he kind of wanted to give Borsk the opportunity to shoot it down and to kind of be right on this one.
yeah,
Um, so in that way, and honestly, Borsk is really insulting in this book. Like they basically make him like as much of an asshole as they possibly can.
that's everything with him up until like five
True.
minutes before he dies.
Yeah, like 2 minutes. um, but yeah, I got like the quote. So at the beginning of the book, Borleas is attacked by I forget what kind of transport it is. It's like a small bulk freighter, I think, basically, and loaded with TIE fighters. And Corran is basically only able to figure out what's going on because he uses the Force. And it's pretty clear, I think, in this one that he's using the Force a few times.
Yeah,
But so yeah, he knows that there's something going on. He kind of knows there's something going on with the Risi as well. And then so there's ties. But he produces all this. The ship has all the right signatures and stuff. But Corran thinks something's wrong. But however, him and I think it's a couple of Y-wings that are in his sector of the planet are able to defeat the fighters. I think they even hit one with an ion cannon. Unfortunately, their transport escapes. Still pretty miraculous that they didn't lose anybody. And then Borsk is like, you guys suck. Like, you let the transport get away. And Akbar's just like, are you serious?
yeah. They had three fighters.
Yeah, so they
Like,
had
that's like
six.
some of the first combat we see with Zinj sending his feelers out, and there's a few notes of that, like, oh, Zinj is just sending out these ships, kind of seeing what people are going to do too.
Yeah. So, Akbar says the freighter fled before the fighter screen was eliminated, but even if it had not, engaging it would have been suicidal. And then he says, I thought such missions were Rogue Squadron's specialty. So basically, he's got no sort of, just no respect really. And Akbar kind of manages to keep it together, despite the fact that
Yeah,
As Die Ghostfish says, 9 quad lasers, Borsk.
Shouldn't we be killing every enemy frigate with one fighter? What is this?
Yeah.
I guess they're thinking like, oh, if the Millennium Falcon and an X-wing can kill a Death Star each time, then if you compare the tonnage there, a fighter against a like this should be easy.
And then Wedge kind of feels the same as Akbar about politics. He's got another very, just a really thinking man's quote. I think finding enemy ships and shooting them up is easier than this politics stuff. And he says that to Leia after the meeting.
Yeah, there's Wedge actually, that kind of position, like Wedge's position with politics, is going to come up a lot in the beginning of Krytos Trap, because the book ends with Corrin, everyone thinking Corrin is dead. So the next one opens with a funeral for Corrin. So
right.
You get a lot more into Wedge's positions, kind of like the military position in the New Republic, on how the more political elements, the Provisional Council are handling things. But you did bring up something with Corrin's force use there that I think is kind of interesting for the whole traitor subplot, where we're kind of being led to believe, or like elements within the New Republic are thinking that Tycho is willingly or not some kind of sleeper agent for the New Republic, and just the idea of of Corrin trusting his gut or not, where you kind of have Arisi and Tycho being kind of reflections of each other, where Corrin has all of his training telling him to listen to these things about Tycho probably being wrong, but not being able to fight this kind of gut feeling or instinctual feeling that he looks up to Tycho and he respects Tycho, when that is the correct path he should be taking. He should be following his instincts rather than this rationalization he's trying to force on top of it that he shouldn't trust Tycho.
But it's like the opposite
with Arisi.
Right, because he's like, because they're in their room and they're about to, do the thing that the Jedi can't do. And he's like, there's no reason why we can't, because we're completely safe. It's really not going to mess the mission up that much. But there's just something like in his gut that tells him he can't do it. And probably also the fact that like she pushes for it a lot and isn't like, like there's something going on. And he knows with her that, well, he doesn't know that there's something going on, but it's just interesting, right? I never thought about them like that.
He's got the gut instinct that he shouldn't trust her, and trying to rationalize all these reasons why he should be closer to her. And I guess I forgot to put your name on the stream layout. Is something I just noticed.
That's fine. It says Justin.
Oh, mine doesn't.
Oh.
So anyways, keep going.
Wow. One thing...
We'll fix it in post.
Fix it in post. We're doing it live and we'll fix it in post. One thing I find interesting, just generally, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is the conversation between Leia and Wedge. Because obviously the relationship between the two has changed pretty significantly, because Leia is now working politics, and that's like, and Wedge is forced to as well, although to a lesser degree. Leia is also starting to settle down a little bit with Han, and I guess as we learn, Luke is off on some adventures we never really learn about, and he's given Leia some instructions on how she can further her own Jedi abilities, which is interesting. Because, like, Luke kind of does what he does in canon after Return of the Jedi. Oh, sorry, I lost you for a second there.
Okay. There we go.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, I've lost about 10 seconds of that.
Okay. I was just saying that it's interesting, the conversation between the two is interesting, because Leia and Wedge, to a lesser degree, have sort of been forced to move into politics. Leia is obviously a politician. Wedge has to live with the rules politicians are putting upon him, where they didn't have to as the rebellion. But what's more, we know that Luke, or we learn in this conversation, that Luke is sort of doing what he did in canon. He's out on a mystery to find Jedi artifacts and whatever else that we've never really learned about. And he's also given Leia some instructions on how to further her own Force abilities.
Yeah, I just love the idea of Luke going around, because everything we read about his early attempts to rebuild the Order, all of his early apprentices, like I'm just thinking of like 10 Dev Sivwara situations that we just never hear about, where he finds these people, they die immediately, and he never.
Oh, Luke fought a race of snail people on Malastare, and he found a snail Jedi, but unfortunately he salted him or something.
I kept wondering why during the Vong War he kept calling it the new Jedi. And
Yeah, I mean that would have been an interesting story, but we don't really learn much about that, do we? I can't think of him hunting. He visits like Dagobah again, but
we kind of get some stuff with like I think Shadows of Mindor.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Kind of hints at
It's
what
in
he'd be doing around that time.
Yeah, it's in that.
But that's
period.
also holodrama changes
Right.
to what could have been happening.
Right. Shadows of Mindor is weird. I just read part of it for a video I was doing on Chronal, and yeah, it's pretty freaky.
But I guess we
But what do you think about Leia as a Jedi? Like, or let's just talk briefly, because this is the first time we've thought really about Leia being a Force user, because I don't think it even mentions it at all in Truce at Bakura, other than maybe she might say, "Oh, I don't feel like Wedge died or like Luke died or anything."
Yeah.
Um,
She's like the slowest burn. The Leia becoming a Jedi subplot has to be one of the slowest burns in all of Star Wars, where it's by Legacy of the Force.
She's like a
she really, yeah,
because she tries.
She's Saba's apprentice at some point, and that's
in Legacy of the Force.
Yeah,
or maybe late new. I can't remember if late New Jedi Order if she, but yeah,
she does some training, but it's not like officially you are part of the Order. Like before then, it's hey, maybe you can use a lightsaber sometimes, and here's how you lift something. Don't look, Corin. This is going to be offensive to you. But
don't look. I can do this on my first try.
Isn't it so easy?
Wow, Corin, what's wrong with you? But yeah, even on like, because I remember in the Jedi Academy trilogy when she's dealing with the what are they called again? The bugs.
Dark Nest. That's correct. Yeah. Came from each other, but yeah.
Oh yeah, Dark Nest, right? But yeah, when she's dealing, like, she kills Baldorian, she's kind of a Jedi at that point, but not like really.
Yeah,
she kills a Hutt. Like, come on.
She's always had some level of like
latent
involvement, but she's not super close. It's kind of like I guess Corrin does a similar thing too.
Yeah, totally. Even
all
like
of
Kyle
the early
Katarn
students
and
do. Kyle, Corrin,
Kip, even like
Kip.
But yeah, by Legacy of the Force and Fate of the Jedi, she's referring to herself as like Jedi Knight Solo, or Jedi Knight Organa Solo,
taking orders from Jaina.
Yeah, well, they're both Jedi Knights at the same time, but they get invited to all the council meetings for reasons. Well, Jaina makes sense; she's like sort of the Jedi, but Leia's like just some old lady.
Yeah.
I don't mind it though. I think it's kind of interesting that like she was too busy not raising children because she was always off doing stuff, but being
Winter was too busy raising her children.
Winter and C-3PO and the Nogri. These kids are lucky they can even speak basic. They don't just grow up learning Nogri grunts. Or like Anakin is basically with the nanny droid the entire time.
But if you're chief of state, it's going to be pretty difficult to find time to learn to be a Jedi.
Oh, so, yeah. Totally. No, it makes sense.
It takes her so long.
I mean, the same thing kind of happened in canon, too.
Yeah.
Like, she's obviously got Force abilities. We see, like, in The Last Jedi, and when she feels Han dying, like, she can fly. Like,
I feel like a lot of it, if we were to get more from Leia's perspective, because we actually don't get a huge amount from Leia's perspective in a lot of places where you'd think we would. It's just we hear about her doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd probably get a lot of the same thing that like we see with Corrin in this, where she's got those latent abilities that are still doing something but she's
like
not
tingling
really
in back of her neck. Don't do this. Do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then she's trying to quote odds, and Han's always there, and Corellians hate odds. Oh my god.
There's so many references to that in this book. So I wish that this didn't annoy me like so much, but it just does. There's so many references to. Let me see. I've got a list somewhere, and there's just so many needless references to the original trilogy. Let's see. One thing though, too, one connection that I found cool. I'm going through my notes. Is I'm pretty sure that Tycho when he crashes on Coruscant and is captured by the Empire, he was using one of the ties that captured Epicura, which I thought was a neat little, like when he's doing his reconnaissance before he's,
Yeah.
I thought that was a neat little thing. I'm trying to find any references in my notes, but
I have a few of them.
Yeah, we have one to Leia talks about. I would agree, as one Corellian has put it, if you anger a Wookiee, you shouldn't be surprised at having your arm tore off. So clearly a reference.
Yeah. Oh, that was something else with Akbar that I found really off-putting was everything that Akbar says is like a reference to water.
Oh,
and
yes.
I feel like if you spend that much time with him, it's got to get really grating.
Like, we get it. The waves, Akbar. Like, Jesus.
He says the word tide probably 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
You frolic in the tide, you get dragged down by the undertow and eaten by a crack, something. Just everything he says has to be water. And
Yeah.
it's like he's got some contractual obligations there that...
Right. I mean, there's not... We're not really in the nuance right now. These aren't the most, like... there's not the most nuanced stories, generally. Speaking of things that I've been taking care of, we also have references to Tapcafs in this one. So I think that's all 3 books now have at least 2 of them have references to Tapcafs, which is nice. Here's one quote too: Corran Horn has an annoying facility of beating those kind of odds. Here's another one. The Jedi Knights maintained there was no such thing as luck, just the Force. Apparently all the Jedi Knights maintain that. Not just Obi-Wan once.
Lieutenant Darklighter, I'm a Corellian. I have no use for odds. Wedge smiled broadly, putting as much confidence in it as he could.
Okay, I need to cheer myself up. Let's talk about Corran banging a rodent. Okay, not a rodent, but first of all, Corey, aren't you a big fan of Solonians?
In my Star Wars Edge of the Empire tabletop role-playing game.
Yeah, you're playing as one, right?
Solonian.
Right.
So I can...
So do you want to regale us with Corran's story of meeting and wooing Chertal the Solonian? I don't want to do it because I want to hear you do it.
I mean, how much detail do we need to go in with it? Do we need to read
as much as possible?
Yella's whole story. Okay. I need to find a keyword where I can find this.
Infertile.
That's not the best.
I bet you it comes up.
Absolutely. Though Turtle wasn't fertile.
Cheryl wasn't fertile. You know what's funny too? I wikied her after the book to see if she was in anything else, and her descriptor is an infertile Solonian. Can you? I guess I get that fertility is an important part of Solonian culture, but can you imagine if like there was a random human character that was infertile, and it was like Josephine was an infertile human from Coruscant?
That's just that comes before even her species.
Yeah. Sorry.
Her main identity is just being infertile.
So let's give a bit of backstory, and I know we're jumping. I just couldn't. I've been too excited to talk about this.
So it all comes up because Gavin's like super into Asir Sailor, who is a future Rogue Squadron pilot and someone who they meet in Invisisec, which is kind of a place on Coruscant where all the unwanted parts of society, which in Imperial society largely means aliens, kind of were congregating and starting their own movement. And she hints at being from another intelligence group,
like the Bothan intelligence or something
we get into later. Yeah. And doesn't come super clean with why she's there. But Gavin falls in love with her, and they're a couple for
6 months, I think,
for the rest of...
Oh, sorry, yeah. You were talking about Gavin. Yeah, Gavin until like the Vong War, at least, right?
Yeah, like anytime Gavin is mentioned as being with anyone, it's Asir. So I think they're together the whole time. It's not something I've put a lot of time into making sure I'm correct on this little factoid.
I find that very hard to believe.
If anyone is unsure on that,
also make sure you look up a picture of her on Star Wars Wiki too, because it like it spends like any time a woman is mentioned in this book, anytime there's at least a paragraph about her being beautiful, and that isn't limited to just humans. So when she first comes up, it's like, oh, she had silky fur and talks about how beautiful she is. And then you Google like her on the Star Wars wiki, and it's like horse-faced Bothan. They're not a good-looking species. I'm sorry.
There's a lot of Friendship is Magic fans who are going to be...
Yeah, I'm about to be canceled. Okay, but yeah, so you were saying they're a couple, at least until the
At least 6
War.
months. At least to start revenge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it ever comes up again, but there's no reason to believe they're...
I think she is mentioned in New Jedi Order at one point.
Yeah, a lot of the people... So the two people who join Rogue Squadron in this book...
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think I lost you, Corey. Hold on. Sorry, can you repeat that? I just lost that.
So there's two. You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yep.
Okay, so there's two characters that are introduced in this book that become full Rogue Squadron members next book, which are Iniri Forge and Asir Salor, and they actually stay as Rogue Squadron pilots for a long time. I know Iniri is at least.
Which are both super convenient that they're good enough to pilot or fly in Rogue Squadron.
Well, it just happens to turn out that Asir was like a first cousin of Peshk or something, a second cousin.
Of course.
And Iniri Forge is Lujane Forge's sister.
But also like the girlfriend of a drug dealer, essentially.
Yeah, just to start with. But as soon as he reveals himself to be slightly unreliable, then she changes her ways. But I feel like he explains that.
It's fine.
Well
I'm okay with
about
that.
Kessel.
Yeah.
So it worked out all right. But but they get introduced in there. They're going to be with us for a while. So we should probably jump back to
the important stuff.
Well, we're pretty far in the future here, and
we were going to talk about ferrets. We didn't get all the way through that.
I was trying to get away from that.
No, you didn't read the thing yet.
How much of this am I reading?
All of it. What do you mean?
Okay.
Jesus.
Turtle Rulewar was a female Solonian who had been sent to our unit to get some training. It was a cultural exchange program. She was tall, at least 2 meters, and slender. Solonians are all alive, and she was covered with a relatively short black fur that glistened with a silver blue when the light hit it right. Definitely gorgeous, definitely humanoid, and definitely not human. The annual Coruscant Awards ball was coming up, and she didn't know anyone.
Could get to the good part. Oh, sorry. You don't need to read it. You don't need to read it all. I'll just give a brief backstory. Basically, Corrin's working with Coruscant, Corellian security. They get a transfer student. Basically, she's a Solonian. Basically, a giant ferret. I disagree that she's humanoid, but anyway, what happens?
Well, they date for 6 months. They have a wonderful time but what they found out was that the chemistry wasn't right, is how Corrin puts it. And what he means by that is that Corrin was allergic to her, and Corrin's sweat was highly acidic for a human, still within regular ranges. If you've ever listened to the Rooster Teeth podcast, this is something that Gus Sorolla talks about a lot, where his acid will kind of melt his laptop. And this is something that Corrin had as well, and it was enough to cause a lot of skin irritation it would mess up the fur, I think. This isn't something I took a lot of notes on because I didn't think I'd be in charge of. Why are you not doing this part?
I don't know. You basically got it all. They're allergic to each other, but the real juicy part at the end, Gavin is like, because Gavin's what, 18 at this point, I think?
I think he joined when he was 16, and this is only a month after.
Okay, so he's 16. Listen, Gavin's basically asking for Corrin's approval to bang a Bothan. And I don't remember exactly what Gavin says, but Corrin is like, sorry, I don't remember what Corrin says, but Gavin is like, was it? And then basically asking, was the sex between the two of them good, despite the fact that, yes, one is a ferret. And Corrin says something like, he winks at him and says something like, the best I ever had, or something.
That sounds close enough to what he said.
Yeah. Which actually kind of makes sense, because we talked about, like, this book is just, it's very weird about how it treats, like, sex and stuff. Like,
it's very sexually charged.
You can actually rank the attractiveness of the women at this point based on Corrin's descriptions, because at one point he'll compare. It's like, okay, Arisi is better looking than Iella, but Iella is worse looking than Mirax. So you can make an official like table of like the attractiveness of the women. I'm pretty sure it's Arisi, Mirax, and then Iella, according to Corrin. But then again, Corrin's into Solonians.
It goes Churtle, Arisi.
Churtle, big gap. Arisi.
We shouldn't be kink shaming Corrin.
That's true. But then again, I think I had some more. Is there anything else you want to talk about? I'm just trying to see if I had any more romantic.
We might want to. Well, it is kind of weird that he goes from like his final decision to not have sex with Arisi. Then the next page is him asking Mirax out after the Battle of Court. Well, I guess that's a couple weeks later. But
is it? It's hard. It's hard to.
The timeline gets kind of weird in some places where they have the speeder chase through Coruscant, and then there's some mention that was 5 days ago.
Oh, okay, I missed that.
The next time we see Wedge, so there was a lot of stuff there. I guess the one thing that I kind of noted about the romantic stuff was that when Corrin and Arisi kiss, it's like they're in the middle of a conversation with Winter about Alderaan,
right.
And Winter's just standing there staring at them, and Corrin just decides to. And I just felt really bad for Winter in that situation. Like that, you don't do that to your friends. You don't just like start making out with someone.
Although, if you're gonna do it to any of the women, it would be Winter because she's like a pro. I love Winter. Do you want to give some background on her, Corrin? I mean, on her, Corrin, and what was I gonna say? Her, Corrin, and Tycho.
On specifically the three. Well.
Yeah, or just generally, I guess, her, because, like, so she first appears...
She comes in the Thrawn trilogy, is where she comes up first, but this is our first time on the podcast really dealing with her.
Right.
Where she's a nanny for Leia's kids, but also probably the best New Republic intel officer, or intel agent that they have.
Right. What's her code name again during the...
They say it's Targeter, but I feel like that was
something she has another one, though, doesn't she? During the... Like, doesn't she have one during the Galactic Civil War?
She has a bunch of them, and I can't remember any other than Targeter right now. But her and Tycho are married later, so she's Alderaanian as well. She was kind of raised with Leia. And so Corrin was kind of talking about Tycho to Winter, and they were having a discussion about whose life was harder.
Right.
Where
that part was really weird.
Corrin was trying to downplay what Tycho went through, and Winter explains, like, yeah, you saw your dad get killed, but then Tycho was on the phone with his entire family when Alderaan got destroyed. Thought he just lost the connection, but no, that was the Death Star.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Winter's a cool character though. Like she's like dangerously competent. Although later on, the bit with Oral where they're trying to get through the gases and like she doesn't figure that out, I thought was a bit weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's a great character. I don't know. I always like when she pops up. Although it doesn't make any sense. You're right, because she is more or less given nanny duty because she's like she was Leia's friend growing up on Alderaan, right? And it's always talk about how they look very similar and whatnot. And I think sometimes it mentions in Thrawn, maybe sometimes she would pretend to be Leia or whatever. But yeah, but she's got white hair, which is, of course, the person named Winter has white hair.
We kind of talked about what the plan was for getting into Coruscant, and
did we?
Well, we talked about that they wanted to get to Coruscant, and they decided that rogues infiltrating and bringing down the shields would be the way to do it, right. Which is what most of this book is about. Yeah. But the first step in that plan is that they are going to go to Kessel, get some guys out of prison, especially Black Sun operatives, which is a criminal organization that was
a nasty one too.
Very nasty and shut down by the Empire. They want to get some of the worst people from that organization that are still on Kessel, and they want to send them to Coruscant along with Rogue Squadron
for some reason
to start messing stuff up for the Empire.
Basically, yeah. Like it makes very little sense. I don't know if they just wanted to have a Kessel moment or what, but like you've got to hold that planet afterwards. And like the Empire can deal with shit like that. There's like a whole bit about how the Black Sun was bad, but under the Empire it wasn't that bad because, you know, they would just kill you. But
Well,
like,
I think when Corrin's thinking about it, it was like they'd only at some point they had their own kind of honor because they would kill who they were
yeah,
looking for. But then they started getting worse, where they would kill who they were looking for in everyone's family as well.
yeah,
Uh, but it does kind of turn out that the only person who they bring uh, from Kessel who is especially helpful is an Eerie Forge.
yeah.
And so a lot of it was just kind of set up to get her out.
She wasn't even a prisoner
Uh,
though.
yeah. So,
But
mm,
I found that a bit weird though because like the relationship between Morth Duel, so basically they go to Kessel. They're like, okay, so we'll take some bad guys off your hand, but we need to get good guys as well. Like because it was an imperial prison, they got some real nasty people, but they've also got some good people. So the deal is, we take a good person and say this one really good person is worth two bad people.
yeah.
So the New Republic is taking three, and it's kind of like an even balance sheet. Why didn't
Yeah.
Morth
They were kind of
Duel?
hoping. Sorry, go ahead.
Why didn't Morth Duel just throw those dudes into a spider hole?
Yeah, he was in charge of everything there. He could have just gone. But I guess there was like their own power structures within the prison
Yeah, I guess.
when everything broke up. Like, it's not like they were super imprisoned. They were just stuck on Kessel, and Mirth Duel was kind of stuck with them. So if he started trying for a power play to kill like Fleury Voru and Zekatine, then everyone would have killed him. It's the thing that's least clear to me is how he managed to keep control in that system.
Right. I
But
mean, it's kind of the same setup when they go there in Jedi Academy, isn't it?
yeah, well, it's 10 years later, same guy's in charge, and he
Is it
seems
really? Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
incredibly incompetent. Is
What's the
I think the
what's
two
his
best
buddy's
words
name?
to
Skinrax or Skidrax or
Skidmark.
Skimramps or Skidmark? Yeah. What is it again? It's something
I
like that. I try not to wiki too much during the Morth Duel associate. Oh, what was his name? Oh, I'm not gonna be able to find it. Chat.
but they're kind of
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think I lost you there for a second while I was typing.
While you were searching, I was just gonna go on
Yeah,
more
yeah,
with
go ahead.
the. They were kind of hoping that the Black Sun operatives they got would be able to unite some of the criminal elements on Coruscant and help them with what they needed to do. Which they had a plan worked out eventually with Voru, where they were gonna uh, work more with combined resources to get
Right.
computer cores, and then they'd have control over the shields. But the plan they end up going with at the end of the book, which is hijacking a construction machine, forming a storm, and then flying into that storm to blow up a backup generator
We
to
Zeus
bring the
now,
shields
boys.
down temporarily. uh, Ends up not being especially like the Black Sun operatives end up not being especially useful for any of that.
Right.
Which you don't know going in that that's going to be what you're doing, but
Yeah.
the starting point of free the Black Sun, step 2 question mark, step 3 Coruscant probably could have used a bit more fleshing out.
Oh my god, that's so funny. It would be a better mission for maybe like Wraith Squadron or like just or Skinksnix. That's the guy's name, by the way. But
Well, isn't it partially Coruscant being what it is that makes Wedge want Wraith Squadron to be a thing, where Rogue doesn't have quite the same ground capabilities that
yeah,
they need to?
and kind of the ability to act outside of
Yeah,
traditional.
because we're going to be coming up to and up the point where the New Republic is saying we need to focus on Zinj,
Mhm,
whereas the back to war needs to happen. So
mhm.
the false Rogue Squadron kind of operates.
Right. Die Ghost has a good point too. He says freeing the Black Sun was Borsk's idea to get Bothans out of Kessel. That is a good point because they
Yeah,
do get a lot of Bothans out of Kessel, and it is Borsk who has the idea because like that would never be something like Akbar's idea because he hates kind of the underworld.
like, it makes sense why Borsk would want that. The connection to the operation isn't quite as clear as
Mhm.
they would have wanted it to be. So
Right. Yeah. No, it is what it is. There's a lot of kind of ridiculousness in this book, more so than the last one.
yeah,
Significantly more so.
uh,
A lot less
but
fighter piloting as well.
we get to the point after that where they are going trading into Kessel, or not into Kessel. They go to Kessel, they get the people they're going to be infiltrating into Coruscant. But the actual infiltration, they're split into groups. They're not told which members of Rogue Squadron are actually going, but it turns out all of them are. So Corrin is grouped with Arisi, and they meet up with Winter. Their disguise is that they are.
She's like a Kuwati noble.
Yeah, so Arisi is a Kuwati noble, and
he's a concubine essentially, or not a concubine, like a breeder. I forget what the actual name for them is.
Yeah,
a child bearer, or not bearer, child giver.
So the higher classes on Kuwat, in order to prevent inbreeding and to just keep their family lines going, they have these middle class families that would raise a child as a Talbin. And thank you guys. Where they got the best education, the best everything, and then they were used almost exclusively for breeding, and kind of kept around as a nanny. They would raise the kids, but the kids from them would think of themselves as being part of the noble family, and their parent from that family would be seen as their actual parent. And then while they'd still have that caretaker, the caretaker Talbin was not considered their actual biological parent in the same way. So the middle class family benefits from a huge payment for the Talbin. The Talbin gets to live with the noble family, and then the noble family gets to breed with what they see as the best option for them, not have to intermarry with other noble families to the same way that they might interbreed with themselves, and not lose any legitimacy. So it's kind of a gross arrangement. Yeah. And they have to so Corrin is walking around in these huge bundled clothes while Arisi is acting all entitled.
I have a good quote for this, by the way.
Go for it.
Because this is one of the examples where Michael Stackpole was obviously going... Anyway, well, I won't get into this. But, okay. Thus, though she was fully clothed, anyone with enough intelligence to outwit a Kowakian monkey lizard could imagine what Arisi looked like naked, and the idea of having to share a cabin with her doubtless seemed a wonderful joy to plenty of men. Yikes.
And there was the... Stackpole was a thirsty dude. There was an explicit mention of whether it was worth her treating him like shit for how attractive she was.
And they actually say no, so...
Yeah, well...
Which is weird, because she's at the top of Corrin's pyramid of sexiness.
We need a graphic for the next episode.
I can tell you what it is right now. And at the top is a Solonian, and then there's the whole human league, which is significantly far below. So it goes Solonian, Bothan, Arisi, everyone else. For anyone following along at home.
But so that
doesn't matter because he was blocked by the Force the entire time anyway.
They meet up with Winter, who gets to experience all of this firsthand. These people that she just met, getting angry at her for downplaying the seriousness of Alderaan's destruction, then starts making out with this other chick immediately. The other group that we have is Wedge, Pashkraken, and Ielo Asiri, who's Corrin's old Corsac partner.
She doesn't know Corrin's there either, which is interesting.
Yeah. She got sent there by Gil Bastra, who is kind of their mentor. That was where her identity was kind of set up. And then she became a rebel operative, I believe after losing Derek, which is her husband.
Right. Yeah.
Losing track of him. Not.
Yeah.
But then we have Mirax Tarek, who brought in every other member of Rogue Squadron. So
it's funny
Corrin,
because Corrin is like traveling. Sorry, go ahead. I lost you for a second there.
No, go ahead. I was just recapping.
I was just saying it's funny because like Corrin gets to travel like first class, like, and he's like not used to being like a rich snob to people, and then other people are like traveling in the brig basically.
Yeah, they get sent. Mirax and everyone else get sent to Invisisec because most of them are aliens and they couldn't have had the same position. Like,
good point.
Yeah. They meet up. That's how they meet up with Asir, and you have Gavin and Rosati are the two humans in that group, and I think everyone else is an alien because Oral is a Gond, Nawar is a Twi'lek. Other people are there as well.
Gavin's kind of
but
dirty looking, so it makes sense.
he's from Tatooine, so no one thinks that's worth anything.
Oh yeah, then Wedge has the he's like being the injured Imperial, which I thought was a cool disguise.
Yeah, and the person who lets them in is like, yeah, they should have just the MD droid should have just let you die,
Oh
which
yeah, you could hear
which
that.
he doesn't say directly to him, but it's close enough that Wedge can hear it.
Yeah, like how
Yeah, Shiel
wonderful how
and Arl are the two I forgot.
wonderful how they talk about their veterans. You should have died. You look like shit from just FYI.
But in all of this, what we haven't mentioned is that Wedge has smuggled in someone else, Mr. Tycho Selchu, who everyone thought was on Nakivzor, and many believe to have died when
Mhm.
Zinj attacked Nakivzor after a meeting between the Provisional Council there.
Right.
And this is, to the best of my ability or best of my understanding, is what the title of the book refers to.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess so. I never really thought about it like that, to be honest. I always figured it was because the scheme is so like harebrained, but in the end, Gavin is the one who comes up with it.
Yeah, because
Um,
anything else, it's like Akbar's gamble and then Borsk's gamble and then Gavin's gamble. The only thing where it's like Wedge is the one making this decision without anyone else
yeah,
is the idea to bring Tycho in as their
yeah,
backup,
I guess you're right.
which pays off for everything except for the fact that
Not for
it's what
Tycho. Yeah.
causes Corin to die or to die. And because at this point in the book, you're still not supposed to be entirely clear on whether Tycho is the traitor or not, because they do highlight a lot that there is a traitor. Mirax attempted to get off planet. She was supposed to leave before any of them, but her identity got compromised.
Right.
And then when Zekatine betrays them when they're doing the raid on the computer thing, he points out that someone had betrayed them beforehand
Mm-hmm.
for him to have even been in a position to betray them because Curtin Lore had kidnapped Zeka and shot him
Yeah.
and kind of told him you have to work for us now, otherwise you're screwed.
There is sort of one point where it kind of suggests that it's not Tycho because there's a meeting that Tycho's at, and I'm pretty sure Curtin Lore says we can't report on that meeting because our spy isn't there, basically.
Yeah,
So I think it's so hard because we obviously know what's happened. I think you can figure out that it's not Tycho, but I'm not 100% sure. Also, Evan has
yeah.
the good point that it could be Corrin's gambit, which is banging a Salonian. So, just letting you know that.
There are a few hints, like uh we've already mentioned in the previous episodes who the traitor is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm never clear how far into spoilers
Yeah,
going with that, but
it's a Reese.
it's a receipt. But there are a few hints at it. Like usually there are attempts from people. It might just be me reading too much into it.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're getting set up on the planet, Arisi brings up at one point trying to figure out who's actually going to be there in a way that other people don't quite do.
Gotcha.
Where I'll see if I can find when Corrin and Arisi are talking to Wedge when they're in that little meeting in his office.
Mm-hmm.
So who do we report to? They ask. All that will be in your briefing file, Wedge says. Even I do not know what your cover will be or what your travel arrangements are, and I doubt sincerely I'll have a way to contact. Arisi says, you'll be going though, won't you? It only makes sense that they would send all of us, not just two.
Right.
So if Arisi is reporting back to the Empire, she's trying to find out as much as she can, and then also with the betrayal of Jace, there's a few hints at it, nothing super clear, but I feel like there's a lot more hints that it's not Tycho.
Yeah, I agree.
And that if Tycho were a traitor, it would be like
the one thing is when they see him in the bar, because it's Corrin, and Corrin is generally a reliable narrator as well.
Yeah. That I didn't like that as much.
What's the explanation for that? Anyway, I don't.
He was meeting someone else, and he didn't know Curtin Lore was there.
Oh,
but the way it's kind of put,
that's weird. I don't like that. That's dumb.
Yeah, the way it's put by Corrin is that he was standing there talking to Curtin Lore.
Right.
or something very close to that.
Yeah.
Like,
So what was Curtin Lore doing there? Was he meeting Arisi? He couldn't have been because
uh,
Arisi is back in the apartment.
no, Lore was just there doing other stuff.
But
Corin
that's like the
sees Lore
shadiest bar
twice.
on like all of Coruscant.
Yeah.
Like the dude's clearly got like a drug problem or something.
And then I don't think Curtin knew Tycho was there, did he? Like there's nothing that gives that
No.
away because
Yeah,
obviously
because
you're
he's
still
a
supposed to.
surprise at the end. Like,
Yeah.
but maybe Curtin was like there watching them abduct Celestins or something.
Yeah, he was there. Well, there was that sequence where like six things happen at once and all
Ugh.
happen to be like uh they go through the speeder goes through the window into
It's my
Wedge's
least
apartment,
favorite part of the book.
and then 5 chapters later it turned out that was Corin that did that.
Yeah.
And then he ends his chase by jumping into everyone else in Invisec.
Um. There's yeah. So this, I mean, this book really just is kind of bad for having coincidences to the degree that it does. Like the allies they find being able to pilot good enough to be in Rogue Squadron. That whole situation with like, okay, so basically, I don't even remember that whole. There's like a big chase and it's very convoluted. Who is Corrin actually running from? I don't remember.
There were the people in the bar that were trying to just chase him and kill him because they didn't like him,
Mm-hmm.
and
So
because he was just
he
a higher class human in the establishment. I think they were trying to fight him. Then he fights back, runs, steals a speeder, and gets chased by some Black Sun people. I
right,
think is what happened.
and one of those
Uh,
Black Sun people crashes their speeder bike, and wouldn't you know it, the bike crashes right through the room of the apartment that Wedge is staying in. But that's not
that
all.
Wedge is in at that point with
At that
Mirax,
point,
Winter.
like right as they walk in and start talking about New Republic shit.
Was it Zeka chasing him? 'Cause this was before
I think it was Black Sun people. I don't.
it involved him, but I don't think he was like because they all end up obviously at that firefight. That's when like him and Zeka, along with
Mhm.
Aniri, end up at the Invisec firefight that's going on at that point after Gavin has been accused of being a bigot for not wanting to dance
Well, they're
with
getting
Asir.
shot up by stormtroopers though.
The stormtroopers get in there, then Corrin and Zeka get in there.
Right.
Corrin goes to save Gavin, and then Gavin and Corrin save Aniri, but Zeka leaves, and that's when Curtin Lore captures him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's everything happens at once,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
and
that's how
that's the
Aniri
main problem with this
Zeka.
book, in my opinion. Like, I don't know. It's just there's too much random shit that happens, and it's kind of messy. Like,
Well, it kind of that part of the book reads more like the last season of Arrested Development, where it's all these things. You're getting 5 chapters of everyone's view
yeah,
of a specific set of events
yeah,
at the same time or subsequently, and then it's kind of hard to suss out the exact timeline because
that's true.
until it all comes together, you're not aware of the fact that this is all happening at once.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And it's kind of weird just generally how like the book is set up because when they first arrive at Coruscant, like Wedge spends the first few weeks going to museums and shit.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then
Is it Mirax that finds them by just assuming they're going to go to the Endor exhibit because they're all
yeah.
glass?
Yeah, it is. It's like, yeah, you guys are starfighter pilots. You'll definitely be there. This one museum in all of this planet-wide city. So they spend the first 2 weeks doing that, going to bars, shit like that, and then Tycho shows up and he's like, "Yeah, we got 48 hours." Just FYI.
Yeah. The last coincidence that happens around this point is that we talk about or we hear again about Black Asp, which
Mm-hmm.
is an immobilizer 418
Mm-hmm.
commanded by Ula Elor, who came up in Elor.
Yeah.
Oh, who came up in the last book. She's the one that's commanding the interdictor that the Rogue Squadron pilots fight. Between the books, she was also the one who, I believe she's the one who, or that ship is the one that pulled Bror Jace
Yeah.
out of hyperspace
Right.
because there's only one interdictor in this half of the galaxy.
It's not
In
even
the
a
New
full Star
Republic,
Destroyer either. It's just a cruiser.
yeah,
That's all we got.
the so the events in the last book though before that had happened but I guess before or after that had happened but before the events of this book the no, I messed that up. In the last book, before any of this had happened, the flight commander on that interdictor was sent off to be with Thrawn in the unknown regions, as Isard was still sending him some personnel.
Mm-hmm.
But this had pissed off Ilor
Right.
and caused the loss of their flight coordinator had made her and her entire crew take Black Asp to the New Republic, and they joined the New Republic, and they were then
Just pretty drastic.
yeah. So we don't know how they felt about the political order, but they were then put in charge of getting the fleet into Coruscant. So if the shields were still up while Rogue Squadron was on the surface,
I like this part, by the way. This part's cool. It's
yeah,
like
this was a cool
very
tactic.
Timothy
It's just
Zahnian.
the fact that they trusted her with it after 2 days
Mm-hmm.
in the New Republic.
So sorry, I'll let you.
Kind of weird, but
Yeah. So basically, the plan is, it's kind of a dumb plan actually. And if the Empire didn't want it to work, it wouldn't have. So there's an interdictor cruiser sitting in the Coruscant system somewhere, but not right next to the planet. Close enough that the Empire manages to detect it and probably could have blown it up quite easily, but whatever. Basically, the ship is sitting there along the hyperspace route that the incoming fleet is going to take. If the Coruscant shields are still up, then the fleet obviously isn't going to be able to take the planet. So the Black Asp or the Corsica Rainbow, whatever, is to put on the interdiction bubble, pull them out of hyperspace early, and then presumably they jump away.
yeah. So I think the idea that the Empire could have just blown it up, I think that's more just timeline being kind of weird at this point in the book, where she probably wasn't there for more than the 20 minutes or whatever,
Yeah,
because they
you
were
could be
far enough
right.
out that they'd be safe from the Imperial
Right.
forces.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And then
You mean
because
the
it was
two
all a
Victory
very
Star
strict
Destroyers?
timeline. Yeah. Well, Triumph and Monarch, but
That's true.
she was far enough out that if this fleet would have been safe, it means that position she was in would have been safe.
Mm.
So if she was only there for a couple hours at most, where they knew she was there but they weren't entirely sure what she was doing, or as far as the New Republic knows, they weren't entirely sure what she was doing, then she probably would have been safe. I don't have too much of a problem with her being there as long as it wasn't for a couple days, which is what it can seem like in the book, but I don't think it was.
No, I think you're right. Also, the Triumph and the Monarch are both victories.
Were they VSDs?
Yeah.
I thought they were VSD. There were VSDs and there was also ISDs.
No, they're victories. I just checked it, which is weird.
Did he just because it also says they're stronger than the Golem, so
Yeah.
Did he just not know what a VSD was?
I think he didn't know what a Victory Star Destroyer was, which is weird because they're pretty important in the Thrawn stuff, because Thrawn used victories a lot.
So they were having a stalemate with Emancipator and Liberator,
right?
And
so
they needed Mon Ramonda to come in and
the New Republic's
turn
basically
the
got
tide
like
of an ISD versus VSD.
Yeah, because it seems like the New Republic's got like at least 15 capital ships, because it talks about like all the named ones, then it talks about unnamed capital ships as well. Yeah, but it might have been late. Oh yeah, it was the Star Wars Encyclopedia, I think, which clarified them as being victories. But I guess it is technically ambiguous within the book, isn't it?
I think they are ISDs.
Could be. The wiki could be wrong.
It is kind of ambiguous on it, but I'm pretty sure, like the way I was reading, at least, it was those two were ISDs, and then there were VSDs as well. But it also says the biggest threat they had was the VSDs.
Right.
Like the most damage was coming from that. But I figured the two ISDs kind of came in later.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Regardless, I assumed, but it's just weird. It's a weird kind of tactical setup. But I do like, because Zahn played with hyperspace interdiction technology and that, like a lot of, in ways like that too, with like the Thrawn pincer and stuff. So it's kind of cool to see it used like that. It's just one of those things where you read it and you're like, that makes sense.
Yeah. A lot of Rogue Squadron, like it does the fighter combat really well, but when you get above, kind of wonky. So
yeah. I mean, the battle here is okay, I think.
Yeah. Well, the only real tactical information we get is like they were engaging the Golans over one area, and then the Mon Ramonda / maneuver.
Right.
So and then they kind of cut to afterwards, right in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, well, it talks too about the rebels bringing like weird ships. Like they have like
a
Basically,
lot
little
of
Millennium Falcons
assault
and
frigates
stuff.
being
Yeah.
shuttles that were refit and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
but they
Um.
were also troop landers.
Yeah, that's true. Is it the Star Wars Alliances game that has a cool scene of, or is it? I forget if it's called a Rebellion or Alliance. The old Star Wars computer game, strategy game, where it has a cool shot of the Alliance landing on Coruscant. Have you ever seen that before?
I think that was Star Wars Rebellion,
Yeah, Rebellion. I can.
Supremacy in the UK.
Yeah.
That wasn't its subtitle. It was just called Supremacy
Mm-hmm.
when it was released in the UK.
I always
Star Wars
liked that
Rebellion,
scene.
Supremacy in the UK was not a thing.
Supremacy in the UK. That'd be interesting.
But so that's all going on. That was their plan for the attack.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, or not initially, but the most solid plan they kind of come up with for bringing down the shields is that they are going to get access to the computer, to the main planetary computer, which a lot of this is being written before a lot of modern technology with computers like internet and all that would have been super fleshed out.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's basically
it's always kind of weird reading the Star Wars tech from
yeah,
that
it's
period.
kind of like I think it's like an integer overflow or something crazy. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah.
But
So
they're
it actually seems like a pretty good plan too, because I think at one point Iceheart says, "Yeah, it wasn't a bad plan," but it fails obviously because they're compromised by Arisi.
yeah, they were essentially a bunch of memory cores for the computer that they were gonna put
Mm-hmm.
new code in and then get the Imperials to take the compromised cores, put them
Mm-hmm.
in, and then they'd have access to all the computer systems, and then they could turn the shields on and off at will without having to destroy anything.
Which would have been a
But
better option than what they ended up doing.
yeah, because it doesn't involve bringing down any hardware. They
Mm-hmm.
back as soon as they needed to, so Zinj can swoop in.
Yeah,
But
but they do kind of repair what they broke, like on the fly with the constructor droid.
yeah, they get betrayed by Zekathine with this. This is
Mm-hmm.
where Iniri ends up killing him.
Oh right, it is Zeka here, not Arisi.
Yeah, well, Arisi is the one who would have been telling the Imperials a lot of stuff beforehand, but this is where Zeka was,
Mm-hmm.
Corin, you have a traitor because I wouldn't have the opportunity to do this betrayal if someone else hadn't already betrayed you.
Right.
But and then that gets Corin even more pissed at Tycho.
Yeah.
But they end up having a firefight, blowing up all the, and that's when they're all angry. Corin goes to Wedge again about Tycho, thinking it's him, and Gavin comes up with the new plan to have a storm. And there was
Mm-hmm.
kind of in this conversation where Gavin is putting forward the storm idea. I think it was a reference to Dark Empire, where they were saying
Oh
like
yeah, no
even
Sith
the
could.
Emperor couldn't
Yeah.
control a storm like that, which kind of a reference to I kind of took it as a reference to the Force Storm destroying
Yeah.
everything.
Obviously that's much lighter, but yeah, that's kind of what I took it to. Um. Yeah. I don't know. It's yeah. It is funny how Gavin is the one who ends up coming up with the plan, and he ends up coming up with it because someone says take the world by storm, and he's like ah. And kind of while that happens, there's also like they're in like this weird room where there's like kind of an internal water system, like precipitation and stuff, and then it's dripping
Yeah.
down. So I think they kind of, I kind of took that to be like a representation of what they were gonna do.
I love that scene because it's like they're in this dank underground thing, so that's probably like gross.
Mm-hmm. It's like
Basically
sweat
super
and shit.
water. Everyone else is trying to avoid it. But
Gavin's
you
a
just got
fucking
Gavin
idiot.
standing
Pardon my
up.
French. He's got his he's drinking sweat from people.
But yeah, so we'll probably talk a little bit more about the Krytos virus itself right at the end because
Yeah.
we're getting into
The actual plan.
that part of the plan later,
Yeah.
like with the Krytos trap and back to war more.
Yeah, the Imperial side.
Yeah, but
It's
they're
also garbage juice because there's garbage in the middle of the room. That's like sweating.
yeah, it's not a good place to be. But was it? I think it was that engagement with the computer cores where Tycho does the fly through with his N95s, right? There wasn't a firefight after that.
What do you mean?
When Tycho shows up for the first time and reveals
Oh,
that he was
Tycho,
there,
yeah.
yeah,
He's
that was
got just
that
the one, I
firefight.
think. He's got the
Yeah, he's got the one with
Zed
him,
and
but
the transport as well.
yeah. But so they basically decide that they are going to uh, start the storm. They're going to get the construction thing to eat its way towards the facility to get everyone out of the generators.
Mm-hmm.
But then they find out when that's all happening that there was a secondary facility, so Korn has to fly into the storm.
Right.
And gets a TIE interceptor to fly
Right.
into the
That
ground
part's
as well.
pretty unreal. Not in a terrible way. It's just yeah. So basically, they've got to take down, and this is where the orbital mirrors come into. Basically, they want a big thunderstorm to take out the power station, right? And I guess it's only going to temporarily take down the power for the city.
Yeah.
Because they can't just outright destroy them because they need them working.
Yeah.
So they destroy
As long as they had the shields down for just long enough to infiltrate, that's all they were trying to go for.
Yeah.
So they were trying to find the least destructive way to bring down the power grid for a while.
Mm-hmm. And they go with kind of, I mean, we do see references to, it's weird because this is really the only story that I can think of where Coruscant has these crazy thunder and lightning storms. Like in Plagueis, they talk about, or I think it's Plagueis, they talk about like Coruscant's weather is 100% controlled and they just make it rain occasionally, like just for interesting weather.
Yeah, it was very much like this is what we need for the plot, and I can see why the storms would happen, how they're talking about, but it was definitely
I don't mind it. Yeah,
something he had brought in for the convenience of that. But their way to get the moisture into the air for the storms to happen was they would, and this is my favorite section of the book.
It's the best by far, in my opinion. It's really fun.
They would get an orbital mirror, which is supposed to be reflecting light, to point towards the water to heat the water, evaporate it a bit. But the crew on this orbital mirror includes the cousin of
once removed cousin,
the once removed cousin of Lorth Nita, Virar Nita. The rest of his family of Lorth's family had been killed.
Don't give too many spoilers. I'm doing a video on this, Corey.
Okay, but this guy is really just looking for his moment to shine.
Yeah.
And he's given his moment to literally shine by the rebels, where he is
you cheeky
helping
bastard.
with the rebel takeover, thinking that he is going to help make the planet slightly more comfortable for the Imperial leaders by redirecting this light. And because if the Imperial leaders were uncomfortable, then bad things would happen. So he's doing his part.
Yeah,
in
even though it's
restoring
nighttime, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he's not very smart.
Yeah, so like being on an orbital mirror is like the worst job you can get because you don't do anything. It's all controlled by a computer on the ground. You're basically just fixing stuff or playing cards like Nita's buddies. And yeah, so like Corey said, he thinks that he's like a vital part of he's a vital cog within the Empire. And like how he, like today is the day like that people will remember the contribution he made to history as he is there while the orbital mirror moves.
Others, including the rest of the six-man crew, saw Oset's service as punishment. But Virar Nita saw it as a noble duty. After all, he would take care of it possible. Without Oset's 2711, Imperial Center would be just that much more uncomfortable. And if the people who ran the Empire were uncomfortable, well, then things would just begin to fall apart entirely.
Yep.
So Virar Nita is saving the Empire from my discomfort.
Yep. It's a true hero. Up there with Tarkin, Vader. I don't know. I can't think of anyone else.
Tarkin, Vader, and Virar Nita.
Yeah, Darrakot.
Those are the big four.
Yeah, but it's... And then at the end, I mean, there's kind of a funny bit with his the other officer there. When the Rebel fleet shows up, of course, they're sitting in this unarmed... It's a giant mirror, basically, with probably some engines on it. Some thrusters on it. And they're like... because obviously he's related to Lorth Nita, so who, for those that don't know, he's the Imperial that he's like, it's kind of weird because he's in the Avenger, which is a Star Destroyer, part of Death Squadron when they're tracking like Leia and Han and the Falcon. And he's like the Star Destroyer that's closest to the Falcon, and then when the Falcon does its little maneuver and gets away, it's the blame is put on him, and then he goes to see Vader, and Vader chokes him, and that's where you get apology accepted, Captain Nita or whatever. So basically the officer that's on Nita's ship now, or on his mirror now, is like, listen, just tell them that it was all planned. Lorth Nita was actually a rebel sympathizer, and that'll be fine. And obviously he's kind of just joking. He's like playing cards, not really paying attention. And Nita's like, really? We should do that?
Pettitson is he's the best character in the book, I think.
I agree.
He really knows what's up.
Mm-hmm.
There was an earlier part of the conversation
He just
where,
doesn't give a shit. Like,
yeah, he sees the battle going on. He just doesn't want. He doesn't really care about any, literally anything to do with who wins or loses.
It's like I got reflecting to do.
Go down without a fight, Lieutenant Nita. Pettitson frowned in Nita's direction. 1 proton torpedo, and we go down without. I'll take 2. I want to sit with 2? No, I want 2 more cards. Of proton torpedoes, I want 0. It's my favorite line in the book.
Yeah. And then, of course, the mirror is used because they get control of the mirror on the ground. It's used to somehow destroy one of the Golan platforms. With the power of
it
the
melts
sun.
through everything.
And it's like, obviously you have to wonder, okay, so the mirror has enough energy reflecting back to go through this Golan platform. Like it's described as like piercing through the shield and then like going through each hull layer. How do they not use this on their ships? Like, why don't they have a big mirror strapped to? Why don't they bring a mirror ship into battle then? It's free energy.
It's free real estate. It's probably just something to do with shields not being focused on it. Is
Corey,
the
don't
retcon, but I don't think even without shields they should have been able to do that.
It's like Sid from Toy Story.
Yeah, it's Sid melting a Golan.
That would have been a very, very obscure reference if they had included that in Toy Story.
Literally no one would get it.
Yeah. Solar mirror warships. I don't know.
So
sounds like a job for Lando.
The last part of that operation we should go into too much detail on would just be how Corrin and the TIE fighter collide with things, because that kind of
it's a little. I kind of think they should have just removed that part. Like I think they could have had a. So basically, they destroy the main, or they disable the main generator, but there's a backup generator. It's like hidden completely under. It's like under a statue, right? So
a statue of Palpatine, yeah.
Yeah, so Corrin's got his Z95, and I guess I think he's the only one that's able to do it, because he's got to fly into the storm for that, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got to fly into the storm, and then he's only got 2 concussion missiles.
Yeah, so this thing is deep underground too. So he blows up the concrete and everything surrounding the. I guess it's not even like a generator. It's described more as like because he compares it to the conduit on, is it Borlias that had the conduit?
Yeah, I think it's more like a kind of a repeater station.
Yeah.
So it was keeping the shields up a bit. Like they had the inner shields down by that point. I think the outer shields still weren't. And
yeah, they're like shifting all power to the outer shield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Corrin flies into the storm. He was alone, no one else. This is when the line about no one except for maybe Pash being able to keep up with Corrin.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So he hits the statue with the first missile, and that provides enough of a shield for the conduit that he doesn't take it out.
Mm-hmm. And
even flying back around with the second missile wasn't going to be enough to do it. So Winter remotely uses all of her access codes to get into the TIE Interceptor, make it lock on to the missile, and follow the missile.
Mm-hmm.
Which to get out of that, the TIE Interceptor pilot would have had to take in several seconds to do some override codes.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea was that the missile would hit, blow, and then the TIE Interceptor would fly in right after. And so that's how they take that out. But then the same thing kind of happens to Corrin.
Yeah. Well, it seems too like his ship just locks up.
Yeah, his ship locks up, and then they tie it back to Tycho getting accused of killing Corrin because he's the one that procured the
Z95s.
Z95s. This is probably very
triggering
upsetting
so
for
many
Americans.
Americans.
Yeah, the Z95s.
Zed.
Yeah, Zeds. The Zeddy boys.
ZZ top.
And his locks up. He flies into the building, and everyone thinks he died in the impact.
Mm-hmm.
But before they'd gone on this mission, Pash had overheard an argument between Tycho and Corrin, where Corrin was saying he was going to look into Tycho, find anything he's done to prove that he is a sleeper agent, and then Tycho references how like he's glad that Corrin has that Z95, that Zeddy boy, because that's the one that he was flying, and he'd been
I forgot about that. Yeah,
taking care of it himself. So Pash is kind of looking over and heard part
it's
of
like
it.
literally the worst case scenario for Tycho.
Yeah. Which he reluctantly had reported to his father, Aaron, who
very
a lot of New
jowly at
Republic
this
intelligence. Yeah. But
at that point, isn't this like the first clue too about the Lusankia's true nature? Because when his ship is going down, doesn't he see like he sees a he sees a super star destroyer
on his targeting computer, I think it was. He's saying he's getting ghost readouts or ghost ship readings, where he's got the TIE Interceptor reading. Then under that, sometimes it's a TIE Interceptor, sometimes it's a super star destroyer, which clearly can't be right. But it's because Lusankia,
boys, it is
the
right.
prison we hear about, is a super star destroyer under the surface of Coruscant.
Yeah, and when Isard says she's going to leave Coruscant and go to Lusankia, she means no, she's going underground for a little bit. For a bit. Not forever. As we'll see soon.
Yeah, so I guess that handles all the
New Republic stuff?
New Republic side of stuff.
Let's just briefly cover the Empire stuff because it's going to be a big thing moving forward too.
It's something that came up a few times in the comments that we didn't talk about Squadron, and it's something that we've kind of glossed over here.
Sorry, I lost you there for a second. We didn't talk about who?
It's something that it's come up in the comments a few times that last time and this time we didn't talk too much about it, but it's more just because they're already 2-hour-long podcasts, and it's something that's really going to play into Krytos Trap and Back to War a lot more.
Is that the Imperials? I lost you at the beginning there. Like, what is it we didn't talk about? The Imperials? Okay.
The Imperials and the Krytos virus and
Gotcha.
that plot. So that's just for anyone wondering why we're glossing over it that much.
Yeah.
It just so we're going to talk about it a little bit now.
Yeah.
But it's more that just it's a lot more. It comes into play with what's going on next time.
Yeah.
But you want to go over what Isard's plan is?
So basically, Daracote, who's the Imperial they found at Borlias, he is right. It's the same dude, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He's on Coruscant now, and he's bioengineering this disease that will only harm non-humans, which I think would be probably extremely difficult because most likely humans and other humanoids probably have a common ancestor, but whatever. So he's engineering this virus, and Coruscant is basically... Isard has decided, as we mentioned earlier, that she's going to give up Coruscant, but she's going to give it to the New Republic completely poisoned with this Krytos virus. It's actually in the water before they even secure the planet. And basically, the Empire's only goal here, which kind of diminishes the efforts of the New Republic a little bit, is to hold the planet long enough for this disease to propagate. And it's quite a nasty disease, too. It talks about... It has kind of individual effects on different species. It kills them in, I think, about a week. But I think, who was it? One species, maybe Twi'lek or... So
the Gamorreans break out in boils that all kind of explode.
Yeah.
And then the Quarren liquefies their bones, so they turn into basically a puddle.
And leaks out of them.
Yeah.
And there's one really funny. Well, it's not funny, but there's one quote about like Coruscant's. It's like the streets of Coruscant being filled with alien goo puddles, basically. Let's see if I can
Yeah.
find it. But it's pretty. It's actually pretty disgusting.
So a lot of the lore in Dericote or Dericote through lore reporting to Isard on the progress on the virus,
Mm-hmm.
and lore kind of checking up on what the progress is for the virus, where Isard specifically wants it to not transmit to humans
Mm-hmm.
and wants it to be curable by Bacta.
Yeah, that
The
last one's
idea being
key.
that the New Republic would then have to spend all their resources on procuring Bacta. It's important that the New Republic knows they can do that because then
Mm.
they're going to spend all their money on Bacta to treat the population of Coruscant. And because it's such a big planet with so many aliens on it, it's all concentrated. And if they try to leave, they'd infect other planets while keeping humans safe
Mm-hmm.
and just drain all the New Republic's resources. Then the Imperials could come back and take command once the population has either, if the New Republic doesn't cure everything, run out of resources, or lost the support of the population
Yeah,
for not treating
basically
them
it makes them look
first.
like another empire, kind of,
Yeah,
because like
it
they're
puts them in a no-win situation.
right. Because the empire themselves, like they wouldn't have done shit about it. But they're the empire; they don't have to. But like the New Republic is this new faction that's supposed to be alien friendly. Um, it's kind of interesting because there is an element of like this book touches a lot on that kind of humanocentric nature of like the empire and how the New Republic will be. We were joking about the stuff with Corrin, but he actually does have like a pretty. Let's see if I can find it. He actually does have quotes talking about like whether humans and aliens should mate, and then let's see. Oh yeah. Throughout the galaxy, the permutations of relationships between two or more individuals were legion, as were their rules, formal and otherwise. Blah 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 blah. He basically says it's a where is it? It's like it's a look don't touch policy in Coruscant. And he says, I guess I don't think it's wrong, but it just may not be right. That's what he says about
Yeah,
interspecies relationship. And then we have the whole alien, not supremacy, but I guess alien rights group that comes up. And then we have Curtin Lore has kind of an interesting view of. I'm trying to find that quote. He's got an
yeah.
interesting
So
view about aliens too.
if you want to look for that, the
Yeah.
part of the plot of the book is that Dericote is looking for new species to test it on. So they've already covered a lot of the Gamorrean and Corrin testing by the start of the book,
Mm-hmm.
and he's trying to move on to Celestians.
Hmm.
They were debating a bit on what the next species would be that they go to, where
I think they decided
at
Bothans,
first they
don't
come
they?
up. The idea of Wookiees comes up first, and then they
Oh
say
yeah,
they're too good as slave labor.
yeah.
But then there's suggestions about like Bothans or Ewoks, I think was specifically used.
Yeah,
But they're afraid that if they do that, it'd be too close to mutate to humans easily.
right.
Uh, and then they settle on Celestian. So Errol Nunn gets kidnapped in the middle of it, and she's I think she's part of that group of Celestians that we see getting
Uh,
getting experimented on.
I don't know if it makes it. I don't know if it says outright, but
It's not said
maybe.
outright, but that group of Celestians was captured during the raid,
Mm-hmm. So it's probably
and she
her.
was part of that group, and it involved at least the kid that she was talking about. So I'm not sure if she was the one that was let out or that was given the back to cure,
Mm-hmm.
but she was in that group because it's not explicitly clear what the relationship between everyone in there
Right, because
was.
it does
Dericote
talk to
and
her, or she does mention saving a Soliston, doesn't she? Or
Yeah.
but
she
actually, I
was
think
looking for
what
the kid.
right, but then because what I imagined is later. I remember it talks about her looking. Sorry, my dog is being an idiot. Later, it talks about her looking at like a Soliston kid and like waving and imagining that was the one she saved. I kind of
Yeah.
assumed that that those were the ones that were being let go. That was a weird moment though, because to me that almost felt like because Curtin Lore is like pretty disgusted the entire time, and I do have a quote about that. But I almost felt like when I read that part about him asking for the mother and the child to go, I almost felt like he was being like a bit of a softie there.
Yeah. So at some point when Dericote's experimenting on them, Laura's watching the effects of it, and there's the two like toddler age Celestians that are just
Mm-hmm.
vomiting on the floor, and one of the older ones who we're led to believe are like, or at least Dericote and Lore believe are like mother and kid.
Yeah.
They're like looking after the kids. So Lore says, well, give the cure to those two. And Dericote's like, oh, mother and son, are you going soft or whatever?
Yeah.
But Lore puts forward that it's no, we want them to be able to go and say what the cure is. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It just is interesting because Lore realizes that like the shit that they're doing on the planet, because this isn't just a disease that kills you. It's one that kills you in like a really, really terrible way.
Mm-hmm.
And like Isard especially is very calculated and brutal about it. Like at one point he says something like she's gonna kill all this like Solistans, but leave enough to repopulate the planet at some point, which I thought was weird. But then we have another point. So this is when he's talking to Isard. He says, her reasoning seemed logical to him, which surprised Kurt and Lore. On one hand, she was plotting away to slaughter millions of creatures in a most horrible way. Yet, on the other, she was concerned with having enough space of one species left alive to repopulate devastated worlds. Well, he had no love for Solistans and did see them as being inferior to humanity. He did think of them as something more than grain that could be poisoned and fed to rats, with some pristine kernels held back as seed stock. So, it like, oh, and then there's more too. Just gotta flip to the next page. Was there a time I would have seen this as insanity? That question lurked in his brain, and he was surprised that he did not have a clear answer to it. So I think even Curtin realizes that, like, this shit's a little messed up. But yeah.
Yeah, there was another few places where shows at least some sort of reticence about it.
Yeah, he like throws up the first time he sees it.
Yeah, I can't remember what I was, but his attitude towards Dericote, like he gets kind of hostile, jeopardy from Dericote doing things incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also some parts where he kind of just points out how horrible what they're doing is, and then tries to like walk it back as like, oh no, I actually mean like this kind of horrible, but it's like, no, you don't seem to be fully on board here.
And he does get more like just hostile to Dericote generally, like when he sees what's going on. Not even just like it clearly, because they're kind of buddy in book one. Yeah, I mean, especially Dericote to Curtin, because he like gives him a gift and stuff. But
yeah, but I think there's anything else to bring up now about the general Krytos virus stuff, because we're definitely going to come up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, just I guess it doesn't. They do have plans for it. I think Dericote overpromises a little bit because they can't get it airborne.
That was a big deal, and also the New Republic, because waterborne, and the plan was to evaporate all the water.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of ruins a little bit of the stock.
Yeah,
but
and then eventually it's like basically there needs fluid contact between species.
Yeah, which Corin's all about.
Oh god.
But I guess it's also worth pointing out that at least 3 members of Rogue Squadron were infected, but then got back to treatment. Like Errol was given the virus by Lore and Dericote.
Yeah.
But Nawara and Shiel were sick and unable to fly in the last mission. That's how,
which is kind of funny.
Asir and Iniri get into the squadron and are flying in the mission, because they're out of commission because they have the early stages of Krytos. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting plan. But we are being kind of quiet because we will talk more about this a lot next episode, especially.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to mention, though?
Do you just want to close out with, at least as far as that goes, before we get to the book rankings and any people have with Lore's or with Isard's grand plan for
Lore? Yeah, so while she is leaving the world poisoned to the New Republic, she is retreating herself. She says to Lusankia, does Curtin know what Lusankia is? Probably not.
No, he knows it's a prison. He doesn't know it's a Super Star Destroyer.
Right.
At least they never make that clear.
And he doesn't. He certainly doesn't know it's on world.
He knows Isard is going to leave, but I think he thinks Isard is going to Star Destroyer,
mm-hmm.
not a Super Star Destroyer.
Right. And so Curtin is basically being left behind to, I don't know if he's got a specific goal other than like coordinating resistance, I guess, across the planet.
Yeah, he's basically supposed to take the role that the New Republic had for the Black Sun,
Yeah.
where they're just gonna try to
Just an absolute
bring up
terrible
dissent
choice too.
and be what was it called, the counterinsurgency Palpatine
Yeah.
front or
Yeah,
something.
I can't remember, but yeah, it's something like that.
But he's basically given carte blanche to
Do whatever, yeah. Just basically cause shit.
just make it, yeah. Well, Isard leaves Coruscant.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of like after Coruscant's transformed to Yuuzhan Tar, there's like just people left in the Undercity causing trouble.
Palpatine counterinsurgency front.
Right.
TCF.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's going to be his job.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of looking forward. It comes up that he was kind of looking to fighting with Corrin again, but
Yeah.
now Corrin's dead, so
Well, he was also scared, kind of silly of Corrin.
yeah.
But yeah, he sees it as kind of a. It's like his first chance, I guess, to kind of prove himself, and he basically talks to Isard. He's like, "If I do this, like, I want real power, basically. Like, I don't want to just be your errand boy anymore." She's like, "Well, you'll probably have earned it. We'll see." And he's basically like, "Yeah, she might have to kill me after this."
She basically tells him, "You'll be power if you manage to succeed in this. You'll be power. Tell me what you deserve."
Yeah.
And we'll just see if I'm stupid enough to say no to you.
Yeah.
Which basically means if you survive this, there's first off no chance you're surviving this.
Mm-hmm.
Second off, I'm probably gonna have to kill you, but will I succeed?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's. Again, we'll talk more about this, but it's interesting. I mean, that's the thing though. Coruscant's such a big city. You can hide. You can hide people anywhere. Like.
Yeah. If you get a group of 10,000 people supporting you, that's nothing.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of in the Thrawn duology. Thrawn's got all those kind of like sleeper groups hidden across the New Republic.
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
Soontiers everywhere.
Yeah, basically. The whole farm of just Soontiers. I'm just looking through my notes. I see references, 2 quotes, and there's just a couple pages apart. Lieutenant Darklighter, I'm a Corellian. I have no use for odds. But we're Corellians, so what use do we have for odds? And that's just like a couple pages apart. That's really nice. But you're a Corellian. You have no respect for how truly hopeless some tasks really are. Yeah. I guess the only other thing I wanted to mention is I really like how Corrin kind of misses Whistler. Like, there's a few points where he says, like, he kind of wishes Whistler was here. And then after the attack on the Rebel base, he's like, is Whistler okay? I know he's just a droid, but they're like, Whistler's fine.
The only other note I had that we haven't talked about yet is the book does have a lot of focus on like how normal people would have viewed the Empire and the New Republic, and that's not something we get in too many places. So I did like when that was coming up and we got that examined a little bit.
Yeah, especially when they're at the museum, I guess, is probably what you're thinking of mostly.
When they're at the museum, and then when they're generally I think Corrin was talking about it with the evacuation,
right,
where they're seeing all those rich people leave, and it's like a lot of them probably bought into the Imperial propaganda. Right. They thought
they're gonna rape and pillage and stuff.
Yeah,
I do like that too. It's just like and there's a few sources that talk about this. Basically, just like the closer you are into the core, like the more you have the Imperial propaganda machine, like messing with you.
Yeah,
and like the rich are all leaving, basically, like with everything they have because they think the New Republic are just gonna come down and like slaughter them all, like big revolution.
Yeah, and when they were at the museum, they talked about it was something that came up in especially Truce of Bakura, the idea that people wouldn't hear about the fact that the Empire was dead for a long time. But the museum references were all like, oh, this shows how the Empire died. But part of that does show that the Imperial narrative is admitting that Palpatine is dead.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, it is kind of cheesy. Like the idea of Palpatine walking into this giant, I think they call it like a mining weapon or something, and
yeah, it was an ore. an Imperial ore mining facility that the evil rebels, were going to use to destroy inhabited worlds.
Right. Of course they were. Um, but yeah, then in the same museum, there's like Ewoks and stuff everywhere. But yeah, that was an interesting idea. I think another part. I think when they're flying into Coruscant, I forgot to note this down, but there's a part where they say, I think it's Corran says, there will be sections of the Empire that might not figure out about Palpatine's death for centuries, is what he says.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. It would have been cool to see a story like that, kind of like Lost Tribe of the Sith style. Lost Tribe of the Sheev, I guess.
I mean, do you kind of get that with the Nogri?
Kind of, yeah.
Where they don't believe.
Yeah.
But I think there's somewhere else where it kind of happens, but no one believes him. I can't remember what it was.
I'm trying to think.
But
Oh, Dala. Kind of.
Dala, yeah, that was
Kind of.
But she was directly, like, she was entirely cut off. So that wasn't
Yeah.
that was really a proximity thing so much as a.
Well, I think Corran says it as a proximity thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always put forward in this as
Or
like
whoever it is,
as a
yeah.
proximity thing.
Yeah.
But I guess, do you want to do the rankings, and then if anyone has questions, if you
Sure.
want to start thinking of them, we'll
I really
get to
don't know the
questions
rankings,
right after
man.
that.
I've been trying to figure out. I really like this book just because it's cool to see, like, you don't see Coruscant or civilian worlds like this really very much. So Rogue Squadron is great because it does such a good job of introducing the characters and making the stakes feel real. And this book kind of loses that, especially where it feels like losing Coruscant is kind of assumed. But you know what? I was reading this book for Truce of Bakura and Rogue Squadron. I read them before I started this podcast. But for this book, I was reading it this week, and I've just had so much work to do and stuff. But I actually really enjoyed the time I spent reading it. Like, I would, like, just sit on the couch for, like, an hour or two every night and just, like, really enjoy the book. And I think it's a worse book than Rogue Squadron, but I think right now it's higher for me. I think I'm going to put this at number 1. So Truce of Bakura is 3, Rogue Squadron is 2, and then this would be number 1 for our 3-book ranking so far.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with a lot of that. Like, I was reading the 3 like as we went for the podcast, but this was I enjoyed Truce of Bakura and Rogue Squadron. I do think Rogue Squadron is probably objectively better.
Yeah, I agree.
But when I finished what is it? Wedges Gamble.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? When I finished Wedges Gamble, if you want to go to the chat there for a second. When I finished Wedges Gamble, I immediately wanted to just continue with Krytos Virus. I started reading the first few chapters of Krytos Virus. So there was a lot of more interesting stuff. I did like the focus on how people viewed the political structures.
Mm-hmm.
And that we saw a bunch of stuff that we wouldn't see in other places. So even though I do think Rogue Squadron was technically better, like if I was reading them all, it might be in the future more Rogue Squadron that I'd go towards. I probably will put Wedges of Gamble above it just because of...
It's got a really fun, like, feel to it. It does... You do lose out because there are almost no space battles. Like, there's the bit with Korn at the end, but that's about it. And that's one of the strong suits. And I guess the bit at the beginning too with the bulk cruiser or whatever. But I don't know, this book is just such a fun read, and it's like it's very compelling because it's fun watching these characters, and you are starting at this point to, like, I remember when I was reading through X-Wing again, not recently but the time before, like the characters of Iella and, like, I guess it would have been Arisi and Iella because they had similar names, which kind of occupied a similar space in my head as, like, and then Mirax's, like, love interest for Corran. Mm-hmm. But this book, all the characters feel like they kind of branch out a bit more. They all kind of have their own personality. I think it does a good job of building off of the first book. It feels very kind of like a continuation. Like, sometimes when you read multiple books in a series, especially I think where there's a gap between release, there's a lack of, like, not lore continuity, but, like, continuity of character and continuity of you know, but yeah, I don't know. This book is just really enjoyable, and there are some issues with it. It's not like it's not super complicated or like like philosophical or anything, but I thought it was really enjoyable. So for me, it's got to be number one.
Yeah, I think it's easier to point out some of the flaws with it than with Rogue Squadron, but I do think overall it ends up coming on top for me as well.
I'm curious because it's been a while since I've read Krytos Trap, and I don't really remember. I don't really remember a whole much about how much I enjoyed the book last time. So I'm curious whether that will take like where that's gonna fall. Do you have any predictions for yourself?
Uh, I think I'm probably gonna put it below Wedge's Gamble,
Mm-hmm.
but above Rogue Squadron. It all I Because the thing that makes me say that is just that it starts to pay off the traitor plot a bit more, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of the where the intrigue comes from with this. Where that I think made me put it higher than Rogue Squadron. I think that that subplot probably raises it for me.
Mm-hmm.
So with that just being resolved, or not resolved, at least the Tycho parts of it, the trial isn't that one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think finishing it may not be as good for me as the lead up to it was,
Mm-hmm.
but it could be that I actually enjoy that part a lot more and put it on top. So that's what I'm going to be looking for.
Yeah. All right. I think I agree. I'm curious though. Looking forward to it at least.
Yeah. So I guess that'll be July 10th on Datapad.
Yeah.
So that'll be our next episode. So now, if anyone in the chat has any questions you want us to get to right now, if there's any that you think of between the episodes and you want us to address them, we do have the Tapcaf Transmissions at gmail.com email address you can send them into, and we'll in the
I'm gonna
next show
check
with
that
it.
right now too to make sure we didn't get any while the thing was going. So I know we got one today. Corey, what's our password? Just
It's password.
I'm in.
Oh, that is one other thing that I did want to bring up for my notes. The whole the M tree thing,
Oh
the
yeah.
way like the fact that shut up, shut up, shut up is how you get into it. That seems like the most common thing someone would say to
To
a
a
droid like
droid,
that.
yeah.
So it's basically like having your password be password.
Yeah. Yeah, except like you might accidentally say it like they do. I'm just reading the emails. I think we got all the comments. You guys have been leaving comments on Podbean, which is cool. I read all of those. I read all of them. I know Corey does on YouTube. And of course the email. I think we got some nice ones from. Let me just see. But yeah, is there any chat questions that we've got to read? I'm trying to remove this guy from spamming, but I just blocked him and it's not letting me remove him for some reason. So just block that guy. Stupid YouTube.
You should probably make each other mods. That would.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not letting me. It's not giving me the mute option, but just ignore that guy. He's a loser.
Wow. Anyways, so one question I'm seeing right there. We might move. Overselling Jeremy is saying ranking might not work in a very short period of time with Sony books. Maybe better go with the tier system. We'll probably evolve how we're handling, but right now,
It's
at
kind of
least in
fun.
the first few, we'll probably group them together different ways. But it'll just be whatever works at the moment. Like with the rankings, it's entirely subjective. So you guys might come to entirely different conclusions to us. It's basically just to give an idea of how we're feeling about each one. So if we need to alter the format for that, we'll
Mm-hmm.
probably just go with the flow on it.
Yeah. And again, we are trying to, because I know I saw some questions too about whether we're going to be on other platforms. We are trying. I think Stitcher is one that we've got some questions about, so we will try to be on Stitcher. But for now, we actually are on iTunes, which is good. There's a bit of a wait. iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and of course YouTube. But any other questions about... Oh, Joel Davis asks, how fleshed out was the Imperial situation in terms of Izard control and the warlords compared to the Thrawn trilogy? And did the museum make Vader look less evil looking? For the latter, it made everyone in the Empire look less evil looking. Certainly made Vader look more dedicated to Palpatine. So, what do you think about the fleshing out of the Imperial situation? Besides for Zind, there's not really much of that in this book.
Yeah, a lot of the fleshing out of what the broader Imperial situation is in source books,
Mm-hmm.
because with each individual book, you had this like warlord of the day, and there was not a huge indicator of how they all fit together.
Yeah.
Like Darksaber mentioned a bunch of them,
Mm-hmm.
but then they all got like retroactively put in their place with the with like Essential Guide to Warfare and
And
that kind
that
of thing.
article too, to
The
spoilers.
spoilers of the Empire
Yeah.
of an Empire, yeah.
Yeah. Corey asks, is there a book that covers Imperial bioweapons? Not one book, but I think there's a section on that in the one of the guides to technology. Let's keep the questions to the book. We'll
Do you
talk
like the
about
way Flurry Voro was done in this book or the next two? I think we'll probably talk about if you want to
yeah, because
with
in this
at the
book
end
we
of
don't
Act
really.
War.
Yeah, he's good in this book. Yeah, I gotta reread. I kind of vaguely remember what happens with him, but yeah.
Anything else for this specific book? We kind of talked in the first episode about other people adding to Legends where they had Star Wars 108 that came out.
Yeah,
Fantasy Flight game stuff still applies to both. The Old Republic expansions kind of apply to both.
yeah.
Uh, so there are some avenues for that. And the more people support older Legends content, the more it's likely, or new releases for Legends related content, the more likely it is
Mm-hmm.
it'd be getting additional stuff. So basically, what I'm saying is that by doing shows like this and encouraging people to go out and buy Legends book, Eckhart and I are
Heroes.
we're keeping Legends afloat. So
Yeah.
yeah,
You're welcome, guys.
you're welcome. Yeah,
We get nothing from this at all. Zero.
hide the super chats you got.
Oh yeah. Also, I will take a second to thank donations. I won't do it live because we're doing this will be on podcast. I don't want to just do. But thank you, Jonathan, for the very generous $55 donation. James, Jonathan again, Mitchell, and Fed Doc. Thank you everyone for the donation, and just thanks for tuning in as well. Oh, Evan does have a good point too. When we talked about Sith Lords, there was the Tales thing in '94, which was a pretty brave comic. Have you ever read that? Tales of the Jedi?
Not recently. I did when I was like earlier on starting Thrawn's Revenge, but it
Mm-hmm.
was like 13 years ago now. So
Yeah. All right. Well, I think I'm done, Corey. Anything else you'd like to? Do you want to plug anything for your channel before we go?
no, I'm good. I
Any
guess
cool
just
videos coming up?
this weekend, I think I'm going to have one on the Chiss Ascendancy.
Ooh.
Anything you've got?
Not really. I
In the
will. I'm
works?
going to be away actually on Friday morning. I'm going to be gone until Tuesday, I think. So like I'm going to Toronto. I'll be there for Canada Day and stuff. So no streams or anything. I do have some videos planned. Other than that, I'm really looking forward to not next week's stream, and we will be back to Thursday, but the week after that.
Yeah. So our next episode is going to be the Krytos. That will be on my channel, Corey's Datapad, which is linked below. I guess my icon for you guys on this channel here. I have a beautiful, awful face cam in my version of the video, but that'll be July 10th. And then for anyone who wants to watch it on Justin's channel, that'll be the VOD for that will be put up right after. Just like every episode is going to be put on both channels.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have any questions for that, if you have any more suggestions for the show, leave them in the comments or email us at tapcaftransmissions@gmail.com.
Yeah, we really like getting your emails too, by the way. Like, if you want to reach us, like Corey and I get lots of messages and stuff, but if you definitely want to reach us, the email is the best way. And if you have, what I encourage too, because it'd be nice to have this as a sort of book club format. If you see something you like or you want to talk about, while you're reading it, just put an email, jot it down, add your thoughts, and we'll get to them.
Yep.
All right. So
that's all I got.
Yep. Me too. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, this has been Justin with Corey. Until next time, may the Force be with you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for watching.